luck.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
We are now delighted to be joined by comedian and my beautiful friend, Francine Lewis, who's here to share with us her upcoming book, The Last Laugh, and an exciting competition in collaboration with none other than that mean Simon Cowell. Francine?
He's not so mean anymore.
Oh, is he not?
He's not. And do you know what?
Since having a child, is it maybe?
Definitely. It's really weird because I really liked Simon. He was nasty. I just found that, I don't know, quite sexy. Now he's way too nice. Way too nice.
That's what they say, isn't it? You get all the nice guys say, I never get any luck with women, and they always say I'm too nice.
Do you know what? The truth is, I've always thought Simon was lovely. He's such a nice guy. Like, when I was doing Britain's Got Talent, I was very, very excited, you know, to meet Simon again because it was the second time I'd actually met him. And I always thought he was such a charming, lovely man.
Of course, you are more recently well known for BGT and your impressions and whatnot.
Do you know what? I do watch a lot of reality TV, a lot of that sort of stuff.
What do you watch?
I love Towie, whenever Love Island's on. Seriously, honeys, 100% definitely. You got to watch Essie. It's all about Towie. Love it, seriously. So I'm always doing, you know, whatever the new reality shows are.
The favourite is Katie Price, and we've got a video. I think we've got a selfie video of us doing.
Have we?
Yeah, we have from
I'm showing
years ago.
Tatiana to Katie Price, which she does amazingly. Come on, Tatiana, let's...
No, I don't.
Tatiana!
Come on.
Katie, there's a mixture between Katie Price and Tatiana.
What do you think? I love when people take me off. It shows what a big star I am.
It's the lick of the lips.
The People's Channel.
A very, very good afternoon to you. It's 3 p.m. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News. We're broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. On today's show, Sir Keir Starmer is in Brussels today as part of his reset with the European Union. Now, the EU wants Britain to accept tens of thousands of asylum seekers per year, plus open borders for the under-30s and greater access to British fishing waters. The big question is this. Will Sir Keir Starmer buckle to Brussels? It's today, the day that Brexit finally died. We'll be live from the European Union throughout today's show, and later I'll be joined by the Brexit guard dog, Ben Habib. And today, the final four leadership candidates made their pitch to a packed Conservative Party conference. And with tough talk and tantalising promises on borders, immigration, net zero and taxes, the big question is this. Why don't they deliver on any of those things they're promising today while they're in power for the past 14 years? And as the Middle East is poised on the verge of all-out war, today I'll be joined in the studio by an extraordinary Iranian activist that's currently on the 588th protest day camped outside the Foreign Office. Earlier this year, he went on a 72-day hunger strike that hospitalised him for 2 weeks. He'll tell me why he wants the Iranian Islamic State destroyed before it takes out the entire West. And the new survey by Fairfuel UK, exclusively revealed to GB News, shows that 85% of drivers fear Labour will ramp up fuel duty in October, and 60% of all voters think Labour's performance has been disastrous since they came into power. I'll be joined by Howard Cox. That's all coming on today's show. Well, it's the show. Always a pleasure to have your company. Will Starmer buckle to Brussels? That's the only question that matters today. Don't forget, for years, he headed up the People's Vote campaign to overturn the Brexit referendum. Did Boris Johnson really get Brexit done? Or did he leave the cat flap unscrewed to Brussels? And now Sir Keir Starmer can unscrew it and allow Ursula von der Leyen and the bureaucrats in Brussels to come scurrying through. We'll be live from Brussels throughout the show. 5 p.m, Keir Starmer will address the EU, and we'll be carrying that live and reacting in real time. Is this the day when Brexit finally died? Send your views the usual way, gbnews.com/your say. Now to your headlines. Here's Cameron Walker.
Martin, thank you. Good afternoon. The top stories from the GB newsroom at 3:02. Breaking news in the last few minutes. Labour peer Lord Ali is under investigation by the Lords Commissioner over alleged non-registration of interests, leading to a possible breach of the members' code of conduct. This has just broken in the last few minutes, so when we have more details on this story, we will bring it straight to you. And in more breaking news this hour, police in Denmark have confirmed that an explosion outside the Israeli embassy in Copenhagen was caused by hand grenades. There are no injuries reported, and it's too early to say how big the blasts have been, according to a police spokesperson. Meanwhile, police in Sweden have also confirmed that loud bangs outside the Israeli embassy in Stockholm last night were the result of gunfire aimed at the building. There are fears that the Middle East is on the cusp of an all-out war after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu swore that Iran will pay for the large-scale missile attack it launched on Israel yesterday evening. And in UK news, all 4 Tory leadership candidates have given their speeches on the final day of the party conference in Birmingham. Shadow Security Minister Tom Tugendhat saying the Tories have led the fight for freedom. The Conservative candidate says he'd had enough of a lack of principle and clarity. Mr Tugendhat said the general election was bruising and that the Tories need to restore trust as he set out his pitch to be the next leader.
Leadership is not about empty promises. It's not about cheap rhetoric or government by management consultancy. It's not about managing decline, and it's not about talking our country down. Leadership is about making choices that serve our country and our people best. I promise you that as your leader, I will serve our country. I will lead with conviction. I will act decisively. My mission is the prosperity and happiness of the British people. Together, we can win.
Well, James Cleverly opened his speech at the Conservative Party conference with an apology to members, adding that the parliamentary wing of the party had let them down.
Sorry on behalf of the Conservative Parliamentary Party who let you down. And we have to be better, much better. And under my leadership, we will be. The British people are never wrong. The British people told us to go and sort ourselves out. Let's not make them tell us again.
Robert Jenrick says the Tories need to create a new Conservative Party that is built on the rock of our proudest traditions and noblest values. Mr Jenrick said we must stand for our nation, our culture and our identity.
Why is it that so much of the British establishment seems to put Britain last? I'm told that we only have enough munitions to last a few weeks in war. And yet our country is giving foreign aid to parts of the world richer than our own. So if I am your leader, I will stand for cutting our bloated foreign aid budget and for spending 3% of GDP on our defence.
Kemi Badenoch has vowed to make the Chancellor wriggle and the Prime Minister sweat. She rounded up the speeches, adding young Conservatives have been let down by the party.
A new political force has risen, something I have been fighting all my political career: identity politics. Like the 1970s, we face a battle of ideas against the left and its desire for ever greater social and economic control. It is socialism returned, socialism in a suit.
Well, the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, says he wants to put the UK-EU relationship back on a stable, positive footing as he met European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen in Brussels. Von der Leyen said the close alignment on international matters was a good foundation for talks on the UK-EU relationship. The Prime Minister is in Brussels to meet European Union chiefs with a promise to put the Brexit years behind us and form a closer relationship with the bloc. He aims to push for a better trading relationship and greater cooperation on defence and security measures. It's his first visit to Brussels as Prime Minister.
I firmly believe that the British public wants a return to pragmatic, sensible leadership when it comes to dealing with our closest neighbours, to make Brexit work and to deliver in their interests, to find ways to boost economic growth, strengthen our security and tackle shared challenges like irregular migration and climate change.
A Metropolitan Police marksman is due to go on trial over the fatal shooting of Chris Caber. 40-year-old Martin Blake is accused of the murder of the 24-year-old Mr Caber in South London in September 2 years ago. Mr Caber died after being shot once in the head through the windscreen of an Audi car in Streatham. Blake has denied the charge against him. His trial is expected to go on for up to 3 weeks. Well, those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Cameron Walker. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Cameron. Now, we've got some breaking news coming in right now, and Labour peer Lord Ali is under investigation by the Lords Commissioner over alleged non-registration of interests, leading to a possible breach of the members' code of conduct. Just to repeat that for you, Lord Ali, of course, been the centre of the huge scandal around the Labour Party, the Free Gear Kia scandal as it became known. Labour peer Lord Ali is now under investigation by the Lords Commissioner over alleged non-registration of interests, leading to a possible breach of the members' code of conduct. More on that story as the news comes in. Moving on now, because Sir Keir Starmer is in Brussels today as part of his reset with the European Union. Now, the EU reportedly wants Britain to accept tens of thousands of asylum seekers per year, plus open borders for under 30s and also greater access to British fishing waters. Will Sir Keir Starmer buckle to Brussels? Well, that's the big question I want to put now to GB News' political correspondent Olivia Utley, who joins us live from Brussels. Olivia, welcome to the show. You're standing outside a place that gives me the shivers. That used to be my old workplace, the European Union, there in Brussels. All eyes on Sir Keir Starmer. What's the latest? A lot of people thinking this could be yet another surrender to Brussels.
Well, he's had his meeting with Ursula von der Leyen this morning. There was a press conference afterwards. Very little concrete came out of that. There were warm words from both sides. Keir Starmer has repeatedly talked about his desire to reset relations with the EU, and the EU does seem more keen to enter into discussion with this government than they were with the last one. The problem is, of course, the EU are very, very tough negotiators indeed, and it sounds as though, as you mentioned in your introduction there, if there were to be any closer ties between Britain and the EU, it would involve the UK giving up quite a lot. So a few of the options on the table are a youth mobility scheme whereby young adults under 30 in Britain and the EU could go freely between one jurisdiction to another to live, work or study for a set number of years. Now, obviously that would go down very badly with Brexiteers, many of whom voted for Brexit in order to take back control of the borders. And actually, there are those in Labour who aren't too sure about that either. Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, is very worried about the impact that a youth mobility scheme would have on overall migration numbers, which she has said she would like to see go down. Another option on the table, but Keir Starmer has pretty much poured cold water on it in recent weeks, is the idea of the UK joining the EU's quota for migrants. So in exchange for sending back migrants who come to the UK on small boats, the UK would sign up to take a quota of the migrants who arrive in the EU. Now, that could end up in a situation where actually we see far, far more migrants coming in, because that EU quota could end up dwarfing the number of people who come over here on small boats. So that is quite a worry as well for particularly Brexiteers, but also plenty in the Labour cabinet who are worried about soaring migration. Those are two things that Keir Starmer was talking about. Another issue that France are pushing on, and apparently Spain and Sweden are backing them, is that they would like to see Britain open up its waters, its fishing waters, to EU countries. So Keir Starmer is being asked for a lot here. Whether he's going to give on any of that remains to be seen. But there's quite a lot of pressure on him too, because he did promise that he was going to reset relations with the EU.
OK, thank you very much. Olivia Utley there, live from Brussels. Of course, we'll cross to you throughout the show. And that big announcement expected shortly before 5 p.m. today. We'll have that live on this show. Will we finally see Brexit die today? All eyes on that later on. Now, earlier on today, the final 4 Tory leadership candidates made their pitch to a packed Conservative Party conference in Birmingham. And our political editor, Christopher Hope, is there at that venue. Welcome to the show, Chris. So, I have to say, there were 4 very, very polished speeches. No doubt been through many speech writers, gem polishing machines, great promises being offered on net zero, on immigration, on the ECHR, on protecting British culture, on cutting foreign aid and spending 3% of our GDP on defence. My question is simple. Great promises. Why didn't they do all of the above when they were 14 years in power?
Martin, hi. Well, welcome to the ICC here in Birmingham as this conference winds up, the final conference of the party season. And that, of course, is the exact question to ask. 14 years in power until July. Why not do all these things when you have the chance? Why talk about it after the event? We heard all 4 candidates speaking to members moments ago. I think James Cleverly did the best in the hall. I interviewed a dozen or so members as they left. Nearly all of them were backing James Cleverly. Some had come over from Kevin Badenoch, Tom Tugendhat and Robert Jenrick. So clearly he's the winner in the hall. On the TV, was he as good? Some are saying on social media Kevin Badenoch came across better on the screen. I think he had in the hall there, he had a podium in front of him, James Cleverly. The other 3 leaders spoke without notes, looked to me a bit lost on this cavernous space. But joining me now is John Cooper, who's the MP for Dumfries and Galloway. You're backing Robert Jenrick, aren't you, Mr. Cooper? Why, do you think he did well in there?
I think he did very well. I think he was powerful, I think he was passionate, he was personal and he was patriotic, and he's got a plan, which I think is one of the key things when you're electing a leader. You need someone with a plan that's ready to go. He's talking about renewing the Conservative Party. That's what we need.
He's calling you the new Conservatives, isn't he, Mr. Jenrick, like New Labour. Is that really the example you want to follow?
It's nothing like New Labour, I think that's fairly clear, but he has, as I say, got a plan, and that's important, and one of the things he's very clear on is the European Convention on Human Rights. And although I think voters in my rural area, in Dumfries and Galloway in Scotland, aren't obsessed with immigration, it is an issue.
Why is it, though, that you can do this when you're in power? Martin Daubney in GBNews is saying correctly, why on earth couldn't the Tories do all this kind of thing back over the 14 years you've been in power? Why wait till you've left to say it all?
Yes, I mean, I think that's a point that Rob touched on as well, and he quit over what we were getting wrong. He said we would stop the vote, and we failed to do that, and we've paid a price for that.
Now, I've got to say, of course, Keir Starmer is in Brussels meeting Ursula von der Leyen today. Do you worry about the future of Brexit?
Yes, I mean, I do worry what he's doing there. What is he accepting a quota of immigrants? What's going on? And the other thing I worry about as well is fishermen, because Scottish fishermen put the fish supper on our dinner tables, and I worry that he may be bargaining away Scottish fish. We do not want to see foreign boats coming in and hoovering up all the fish.
And maybe a deal with the under-30s, freedom of movement?
Yeah, so freedom of movement, this is all predicated on the idea that Europe's closed to us. This is nonsense. Personally, my son is at university and he did his first semester from a Scottish university at the University of Bologna in Italy. So the idea that there's no movement is absolute nonsense.
Now, politics is getting going again already. We're hearing reports at 3 p.m. today that Lord Ali, is facing a probe over potential breaches of parliamentary rules surrounding openness and accountability in the members' code of conduct for the House of Lords. Do you think this is going to be a real problem? The Labour can't shake off this row about freebies from this very rich peer.
Yeah, it comes out piece by piece, and obviously we can't prejudge any investigation. It's fantastic news, I think, from our point of view, that finally a light is being shone onto what's going on over there, and it's obviously not going to be Sue Gray that's investigating this, but I think those Labour MPs who shouted long and loud about investigating the Tories, I'm sure they'll welcome this investigation as well.
But don't you all accept freebies? If you do accept freebies?
I've not been in long enough to have any freebies, I have to say, but I mean, you know, the idea of lobbying and accepting donations and things like that, yes, that's fine, but when it gets to the level of passes for glasses, then it's right, there's an investigation into what is going on.
And just back here to this conference, who do you think will get through to the final 2 next Thursday? MPs are voting on Tuesday and Wednesday for the final 2. Who's your money on?
So I think Rob is there. I think that was the prize here today, was to get into those final 2, and I think Rob certainly has done that. The other person is very, very difficult to call. It's so tight, it's unbelievable. Look, the Tories have got talent here. We've got it in spades. It's great that we've got an embarrassment of riches.
It's a long road back, though. Do you think you can overturn Labour's majority in one term of Parliament?
I think we're in a different place even now. I think when the election on the morning of the 5th of July, people thought they were in for 10 and 15 years. I think it's a different position now. I don't think talk of us returning in 5 years is quite so outlandish.
But Labour will get their act together again. This conference has felt to me like it's a break from the normal day job for the government, but for the Tory government as well. But you could be out of power for 10 years, and by then we'll all be a lot older.
The country can't afford us to be out of power for 10 years. Socialism doesn't work. It bankrupts the country. That's what will happen. I would hope that we're aiming to be back inside 5 years. Absolutely. We need a plan to do that.
Look, John Cooper, the MP for Dumfries and Galloway, with his thoughts on why Robert Jenrick should be leader of the party. And it's very noisy here, Martin. They're taking down this conference.
Yeah, I thought a forklift truck might sweep you away halfway through that there. Chris Hope, superb stuff as ever, live from Birmingham. You've had a great conference, mate. Seriously, superb work. Thank you for everything you've done there. Thank you. Now, moving on now, we've got some astonishing breaking news, and that's that the Danish police have confirmed that explosions outside the Israeli embassy in Copenhagen were caused by hand grenades. Let's get all the latest now with GB News' Homeland Security editor, Mark White. Mark, last night on the end of my show, we saw that astonishing barrage of missiles from Iran into Tel Aviv. Netanyahu responded saying Iran will pay a price. Hezbollah saying we are only in the first round. And now this breaking out in Copenhagen. There's been trouble also in Spain, as I understand it. What's the latest?
Well, I think proof, if any were ever needed, that although that war in the Middle East is thousands of miles away from the UK and other Western nations, it is still being felt in those Western nations. As you say, the police in Denmark confirming that explosions that were reported outside the embassy building in the capital, Copenhagen, late last night, were, they believe, caused by 2 hand grenades that were thrown towards the building. And also confirmation coming through from the police in Sweden that the sound of bangs that were heard outside the embassy building in Stockholm was, according to the police in Stockholm, gunfire aimed at that Israeli embassy building there as well. So some real concerns in Western nations about the potential for Israeli and Jewish targets in particular to be targeted by these Iranian-aligned extremist groups. And of course, we're now looking at these incredible images of the ballistic missiles that came raining down across Israel last night, and the Israeli government confirming, as we watched these, Martin, with increasing alarm because we saw so many impacts, the Israeli government confirming that the majority of those explosions that did hit the ground were in open areas and caused no damage, and the other missiles were taken out in the air by the aerial defence systems that Israel employs to such great effect. What we can also tell you about, Martin, is the first Israeli military casualty, the first death being reported now out of Lebanon in that ground incursion. Captain Eitan Oster, an officer in command of a commando unit that was involved in a ground incursion to take on Hezbollah in one of the villages that they have described as a Hezbollah stronghold, lost his life. A number of other IDF soldiers injured and medevaced out of that area. And throughout the day, airstrikes are continuing in Lebanon, in the capital Beirut and elsewhere in Lebanon, as Israeli Air Force jets and missiles and artillery continue to target these Hezbollah positions in that area. So, of course, Israel taking in fire from Iran as they did last night, but also fighting now in Gaza and on that northern front against Hezbollah in southern Lebanon.
Thank you very much for that update, Mark Wyatt. And later in the show, we'll speak to Sir Malcolm Rifkin, the former Foreign Secretary and Defence Secretary for his take on the perception there could be an increased terror threat, perhaps, here in the United Kingdom. Now, will the Labour Party raise fuel duty in October? Motorists are very, very worried. I'll speak to the Director of Fair Fuel UK, Howard Cox, next. More on that soon. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
There's a huge financial and mental strain for parents, but we have this system now where it talks about they bringing a family member to help, but I don't think that's happening a lot of the time. I think people are having to be off work, look after their child, and often, sorry to say, but their school always calls the mum, and then you have this situation where you have nobody to look after your child. People's grandparents don't seem to want to do it so much, and often family members aren't just down the road. So what we have is no village. And I think it's really important when you have a child that you need that village.
Are children getting more sicker than they used to be? Or is it just that we take the odd sniffle a bit more seriously now since 2020?
Yes, I do think the odd sniffle can be. I know in my school they say 3 days away, you know, the slightest little thing, and it's like...
If you have a cold?
Yeah, no, please, go in, yeah. And
3 days off if you have a cold for a child, and we wonder why all these parents aren't at work. I think some of these figures about people who could be working and aren't working, they're not necessarily on benefits, but some of them will be people who, during the pandemic, particularly parents, decided to get a different work-life balance. They quite liked being at home, and they realised the children are benefiting from it. Do you think those people are in these statistics, Annette?
Of people staying at home with not working?
Who decided to not go back to work of working age?
Yes, I think a lot of people don't want to go into an office anymore either. They've had that little bit of freedom and they're like, I'm not going in. And I know employers are trying to get them to go in, but they just want to be at home. They want to be near their children if their children are sick, whether that's the mum or the dad. And also a lot of people don't live near their office or wherever. They don't want to commute. Train fares have gone up, so they say, well, why should I pay? So you have this whole knock-on effect throughout the economy.
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your-say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back. It's 3:26. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, there are fears of an all-out war in the Middle East as Iran has launched hundreds of missiles towards Israel. But let's not forget that before Iran's 1979 revolution, it used to be a very, very different country to how it is now. This is an Iranian woman in the 1960s by a beach on the Caspian Sea. Look at it, a beautiful, liberal country. And this snap, also from the 60s, shows glamorous locals kicking off their heels to do the Tehran twist to Iranian rock and roll music of the day. It looks like Saint-Tropez in the Middle East. And this photo is of students at Tehran's National University in the mid-1970s. What a wonderful, liberal country that was, but things changed rapidly. And one man who knows just how Iran's changed is a human rights activist, Vahid Beheshti, who joins me now in the studio. He left Iran 27 years ago and for the last 588 days has been camping outside the Foreign Office to protest about the regime. He also went on a hunger strike for 72 days earlier this year until he was hospitalised. An astonishing story. Thank you very, very much for coming into the studio and standing up for your country. Can I first ask you your thoughts last night, the missiles were flying into Tel Aviv. It happened on the show. What are your thoughts about what Iran is doing in the Middle East?
So we knew this is going to happen. And in past 5 months, in all my interviews and speeches, I have said this is an inevitable war. It's going to happen because the leaders of this evil regime, they have no choice than get involved directly with Israel. So they created all these proxies for all these years around Israel. Now Israel is cutting the hands of this octopus of terrorism. One by one, Hamas, Hezbollah, neutralize them. Islamic Jihad going to Houthis. They know Israel. Next one is going to go for the head of octopus, as Naftali Bennett stated yesterday. So they knew this is going to happen. So they are coming toward this before they're going for the head of octopus. So as you said, and you showed the Iran before 1979, forgive me for this, I don't call it the revolution.
Yes.
So that I call it the international military coup against Iran, Islamism occupation. So let me give you this very short story about a few seconds. 1979, before all this chaos in Iran, it was a meeting in Guadeloupe in France between Giscard d'Estaing, James Callaghan from here, Jimmy Carter from America, and Helmut Schmidt from Germany. So they decided in that 3 days meeting for regime change in Iran because the Shah of Iran, he says, he's not going to sell the oil with the same price anymore. That was first reason. The second reason, they were going to create an ideological wall in front of Soviet Union in that time, in front of communism. So very soon after that, they created a character from Khomeini and they transferred the reformist movement that we had in Iran, and the Shah of Iran was on top of that, to the revolutionary movement and end up changing regime in Iran. And very soon, few months later, after the regime, by the encouragement of Soviet Union, attack U.S. embassy, the whole project fall in the hands of Soviet Union, and we are where we are now after 45 years. Now that threat is not there anymore. It's here. Look at our street. Look at our youth. They're radicalizing our youth here. IRGC is based on here. This mosque, these Islamic centers, these organizations, look what they are doing here. And the only country understand the true nature of this evil regime is Israel, and is doing the great job. Israel is not fighting only for themselves. They're fighting for us. They're fighting for our civilizations. I can explain more a little bit about this, but let's go with your question.
It's an extraordinary situation, Vahid, that a citizen of a country is almost willing a war upon it because you want the regime changed, not the country to be destroyed. Of course, you want the country to be returned to how it was. Are you currently in exile? I'm assuming you can never go back. Your life would be in danger.
Exactly. So the clergies of IRGC issued fatwa for my head. So when I was in the hospital after 72 days hunger strike, we understand the fatwa has been issued for my head. So of course is that. But we are not pro-war. We are not warmonger. However, this war has been imposed to us. So we have no choice than to stand together and win this war against this evil regime. Because let me explain something. The nature of this regime is this. They believe they have a divine mission. This is their belief system. And they believe their 12th saint, which is named Mahdi, is alive after 1400 years and he's going to return. So they have to prepare the world for his return. So they have to turn our modern world into Islamic state. So in order to do that, the first step to destroy our civilization, Western civilization, they have to eliminate the state of Israel. So the elimination of Israel is not the goal, it's the first step toward destruction of Western civilization.
And that brings me to my next point. We've just seen hand grenades thrown at the Israeli embassy in Copenhagen. We've seen gunfire outside the Israeli embassy in Stockholm. We've seen repeated week after week after week marches in Britain, parliamentarians leaving office, firebombing of offices. Are you saying that this is a coordinated action that the Iranian Islamic forces want there to be chaos in the West, and Britain should be very, very careful.
Exactly. This is part of hybrid warfare strategies of Iranian regime. They worked on this for past 37, 38 years. They invested billions on this hybrid warfare for today. You think is it just happening overnight that they can mobilize 200,000 people? You think this chaos in university campuses from America, Canada to Europe is just happening overnight? No, this is an alliance of Islamism and Marxism together, not today, yesterday. This is a result of many years. But today, Israel is not fighting only for themselves. They know, as I explained before, the aim is our civilization, Western civilization. Wow. So Israel is fighting for all of us, and in the end, my advice to world leaders is this: stand behind Israel and give up your short and quick interest with this evil regime. I can assure your interest will be much greater with a normal regime in Iran.
Astonishing guest. Thank you, Vahid Beheshti. Superb, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And stay safe out there, mate, because it looks like you're going to be in a spot of bother. Thank you very, very much. Amazing. Now, I'll continue this conversation soon, but first, here's your latest news headlines with Cameron Walker.
Good afternoon. The top stories from the GB newsroom. And more on that breaking news now. The Labour peer at the centre of a row over donations to Sir Keir Starmer is under investigation by the Lord's Standards watchdog over an alleged failure to register interests. Lord Wahid Ali is facing a probe over potential breaches of parliamentary rules surrounding openness and accountability in the Members' Code of Conduct. It comes after a backlash over tens of thousands of pounds worth of gifts accepted by the Prime Minister from the peer, who is a major party donor. Police in Denmark have confirmed that an explosion outside the Israeli embassy in Copenhagen was caused by hand grenades. There are no injuries reported, and it's too early to say how big the blast had been, according to a police spokesperson. Police in Sweden, meanwhile, have also confirmed that loud bangs outside the Israeli embassy in Stockholm last night were the result of gunfire aimed at the building. There are fears the Middle East is on the cusp of an all-out war after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu swore that Iran will pay for the large-scale missile attack it launched on Israel yesterday evening. Now, all four leadership candidates have given their speeches on the final day of the party conference in Birmingham. Shadow Security Minister Tom Tugendhat saying the Tories had led the fight for freedom. The Conservative candidate said he had enough of a lack of principle and clarity. Mr Tugendhat said the general election was bruising and that the Tories need to restore trust as he set out his pitch to be the party's next leader.
Leadership is not about empty promises. It's not about cheap rhetoric or government by management consultancy. It's not about managing decline, and it's not about talking our country down. Leadership is about making choices that serve our country and our people best. I promise you that as your leader, I will serve our country. I will lead with conviction. I will act decisively. My mission is the prosperity and happiness of the British people. Together, we can win.
James Cleverly opened his speech at the Conservative Party conference with an apology to members, adding that the parliamentary wing of the party had let them down.
Sorry on behalf of the Conservative Parliamentary Party who let you down. And we have to be better, much better. And under my leadership, we will be. The British people are never wrong. The British people told us to go and sort ourselves out. Let's not make them tell us again.
A Metropolitan Police marksman has gone on trial over the fatal shooting of Chris Caber. 40-year-old Martin Blake is accused of the murder of 24-year-old Mr Caber in South London in September 2 years ago. Mr Caber died after being shot once in the head through the windscreen of an Audi car in Streatham. Blake has denied the charge against him. His trial is expected to go on for up to 3 weeks. Well, those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Cameron Walker. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome to your GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Well, we've got a cold night ahead with some frost and fog in places, but as we head into tomorrow, plenty of fine and settled weather for many. The south will have to wait though for that as we head into this afternoon. Still plenty of cloud here as low pressure dominates, but as high pressure builds from the north, that's bringing us that fine and settled weather. As I say though, as we head into this evening, there will still be some cloud across the south and southeast and still a few showers feeding into some east and southeastern coasts, but these will generally ease away as we head overnight. And this leaves plenty of clear skies overnight as well. So it is going to be turning cold and we're likely to see some fog, particularly in northern rural spots, and likely to see some frost by the time we wake up tomorrow as well. So to start tomorrow, as I say, most of that cloud generally breaking through the course of the night, but still some showers just feeding in to the southeast coast still by the time we reach tomorrow morning. But elsewhere, plenty of clear skies, so plenty of fog patches in places, and it will be feeling chilly with some frost in places too. But generally largely dry, just away from those showers just feeding into the southeast coast. Tomorrow as well, we've got high pressure building, and that means generally a better day for all, largely dry and settled with plenty of sunny spells around. As I say, still the odd shower just moving into the southeast coast, but you'll probably be unlucky if you catch any of those. Generally dry, just perhaps a build of higher cloud just moving into western parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland later on into the afternoon. But with much lighter winds, generally feeling more pleasant where you do catch the sunshine. As we head into the evening as well, that cloud will continue to build in the west, perhaps some light rain here at times, but overall generally another dry night, plenty of clear spells, so more mist and fog to come and feeling cold once again too. And we are expecting a bit more of unsettled weather as we head into the weekend, so make sure you stay tuned for all the details. Bye for now.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. Shropshire firstly, the eastbound M54 slow going. A lane still closed between the Shifnal turn-off junction 4 and Albrighton junction 3 and it's queuing. A37 in Somerset remains closed off between West Lidford and East Pennard. An accident there means no way through and queues. The earlier bump on the northbound M3 is gone just before the M25 at 2, but of course there's roadworks there as well, so still stop-start. It's a similar tale on the clockwise M25, all lanes back open. There was a bump just after the Swanley interchange for the M20 at 3. That's now cleared. The congestion, though, still there in patches. And Chingford in London, the North Circle of the Cooks Ferry flyover, the eastbound 406, is currently closed off, queuing back through the Edmonton stretch of the A10. That's at the scene of a serious collision there.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome back. Your time is 3:40. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, a new survey by Fair Fuel UK, exclusively revealed to GB News today, shows that 85% of drivers fear that Labour will raise fuel duty next month. And even worse, 60% of all voters think that Labour's performance has been disastrous since they came into power. Well, joining me now on this is the founder of Fair Fuel UK, my good pal, Howard Cox. Howard, welcome to the show. You came into the studio last night, of course, to do this, but of course, war broke out in Israel. Here we are today. Tell us about your survey, how many people have taken part, what it's shown, and how can GB News viewers get involved to help you get those numbers up?
Thank you, Martin. Thank you for having me again. Yeah, it's simple. We're looking at about 25 days now to the actual budget, and we are going to be hit. I'm talking about drivers are going to be the hardest hit sector in that budget. It's no doubt about it. We've had 14 years of a fuel duty freeze in that time, and we decided to do, as we do every year, this is our 14th opinion poll on the budget. We ask supporters, and anyone can take part because we put it out on all of the social media. And we had, in that analysis, you read about the fact that 85% are fearful of a fuel duty rise. That was 48,934. I can reveal today today it's now up to 55,000, and the figures are sort of moving up in a similar sort of magnitude. But the worry is drivers are worried sick. Now, I think I've told you before that I've actually got some credible information that Rachel Reeves is going to put fuel duty up by something like 10 pence per litre. I don't think she'll do that now. I think it'd be more like 5p, which would restore Rishi Sunak's actual cut he did in 2022. But again, we didn't see much of that on the forecourts. That wasn't passed on. But people are genuinely worried sick about it. And I'm very worried that a lot of them, and I thank you to GB News and a few other media channels, but the BBC, ITV and Sky are not taking the threat of the cost of motoring and the impact on the economy that will have on the motorist.
Well, of course they won't, because they want to push the agenda that cars are the root of all evil. Everyone should be going around on push bikes, and everyone should be powered by windmills. Aside from the fact, however, that you've got the concerns of the great British public about fuel duty rises, a huge concern. You also asked the members of the public who responded, and that's 55,000, that's substantially bigger than any YouGov poll, how they felt the Labour Party had been performing. Tell us more.
Well, it's interesting. We asked actually who did they vote for in the general election, and we obviously broke down by Labour, by Lib Dems, by the Tories, and by Reform, etc., etc. No, obviously the Greens think Labour are doing quite well, but the rest of the people, and particularly the ones that did not vote or would not say, we're looking at something like 90 to 87%. Who actually said the Labour are disastrous. And really, when you look at the whole poll, look at Labour, they're saying the same sort of thing, the magnitude. You're looking at something like 4 to 5, well, half of the Labour voters think Labour are disastrous. And I think there might be a bit of buyer's remorse there in terms of actually what's going on. The fact is, people need their car. There are 37 million drivers in this country, and every political party should consider how important they are to the economy and the social aspect of the community. It's the biggest actually gift to us moving around the country is having a car. And the last 100 years, it is one of the greatest gifts to, what I get very angry, Martin, when people say to me, we've got to get people out of their cars. I say, why? And they can't answer that. It's purely emotional, ideological position they're in. So, I would really like people to take part in this poll, because we're going to present it to all the media, and above all, every single MP will get a copy, including Rachel Reeves. And so they can actually sign up to take part at fairfueluk.com.
Yeah, and I'll make sure that I put a link to that survey out on my social media afterwards. I know you've been slapping me to get on with that, Howard. I've been a bit busy with other stuff, but I promise you, my old son, I will. Fascinating thing you told me, Howard, very quickly, is that the bigger the vehicle, the more annoyed drivers are. So truck drivers, freight drivers, all the rest of it, they're absolutely livid off the scale.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, obviously, we just touched about 5% of this poll. We ask about pay per mile, and we ask people what they drive. Everything from a bicycle, or if you walk, all the way through to a big HGV 44-ton truck. We're asking what you do, and there's no doubt about it, because people forget that a 44-ton truck does about 8 miles to the gallon. So any increase in fuel duty, the magnitude of 5 or 10p, is tens of thousands of pounds a year to a small haulage company. And that means they can't employ people. They can't even buy cleaner HGV vehicles. It's complete and utter stupid lack of common sense. We need to actually cut the cost of motoring, because that will cut inflation and add to growth. And guess what? What we buy in the shops, inflation would rocket downwards. But hey, who am I to say that? I'm not the Prime Minister.
Well, maybe one day, Howard Cox, but certainly for now, excellent work on Fairfuel UK. I'll make sure I'll get that link out later on. Howard Cox, thanks for joining us. Always a pleasure. Now then, coming up, do you have a dog and do you think you've got them trained? Well, apparently it's the other way around. His master's voice might not be the one in control. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
This Sunday, join me, Camilla Tominey, for an exclusive interview with one of the most controversial, influential and unique political figures of our time. Boris Johnson will be in studio discussing his new memoir, Unleashed, the gripping story of how he dealt with plotting politicians, problematic princes and a pandemic. From Boris bikes to Brexit and everything else in between. This Sunday at 9:30 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Right, we're having beans this morning.
Beans for breakfast. There's no better breakfast, is there?
I like beans on toast for breakfast.
So do I. I would actually call myself a baked beans connoisseur.
Would you? Well, we can put you to the test. Tell us what the story is.
The story is, you might think beans, you might think Heinz. Heinz means beans.
Beans means Heinz.
Beans means Heinz. Heinz means beans. Who knows? So, of all of the supermarket baked beans, it is actually the Aldi supermarket version, this version over here, which came out on top. The Bramwell's baked beans, 76% on the taste test.
And they're much cheaper as well.
Much cheaper. Households can save, if you're buying 2 cans a week, £100 a year buying the Aldi version of these baked beans. So we thought we're going to do a blind taste test this morning to see.
So we've got the Aldi beans, we've got M&S beans, and we've got beans Heinz. So I think number 2 is the best one.
Yeah, I agree.
Right,
Two came first best to me.
So the Heinz is number 3.
Interesting.
Which was the worst one?
Which is the worst one, which is the ones, actually, I'll buy it home.
Do you know what? That's just proven it. M&S was number one. And Aldi was number two, which was our favourite as well.
I said M&S.
Yeah, and we both said Aldi.
We did say Aldi. I have to be honest, I was not expecting that.
I told you. This is the hill I will die on. These are the beans that I get at home and I love them.
At university, you get the tin that's half that size, and it was 21p for the store ones and 23p for Heinz baked beans. And as I say, the key was in the thickness of the sauce and how hard the beans were. They
actually are really nice. They're really. I am really surprised, and we buy more than 2 cans a week, so it saved me a couple of £100.
We get through 2 cans.
you like the Aldi ones? I like the Aldi ones. I'm shocked.
They're a lot cheaper. Yeah.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's almost 10 to 4. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, I absolutely love this song because a round of pause for our clever hounds, as a new study has found that dogs have taught us to speak slower. Our furry friends can only process 2 sounds a second. So apparently, we've learned to slow down when talking to our poochers. And joining me now is the dog welfare campaigner, Debbie Matthews. Debbie, absolute delight to see you with your wonderful dog there. I believe your dog's name is Pepper.
That's right. Hello, nice to see you.
And tell us about this study. I always thought it was his master's voice that was in control. It seems all along, Debbie, no surprise to you, it's actually the pooch that's pulling the strings. Tell us more.
Well, anybody who's a dog owner will know that the amazing bond that you have with your pet. And what happens is you start to work as one. So they'll be talking to you, telling you what they want, which is they normally get their way. And then there's us who will be throwing out the occasional word, which they understand, like treat, going out, walkies, all the normal things. But then you've got like police dogs, guide dogs, amazing dogs that learn amazing commands. And they're just incredible dogs. I love them.
And it says here, it's a serious study, this was done at the Hearing Institute at the Pasteur Institute in Paris. This is a proper academic study. They put electrodes on dogs' heads. No dogs were hurt during the study, of course. And what they did is they read out instructions, and the dogs responded to them more when they were slower. And over time, the masters, the humans, have learned that we just need to slow down, get down onto the dog's level, as it were, and have a better communication. And I think, what a great piece of advice. Slow down a bit, have a chat with your dog, and just embrace that wonderful interface between dog and human.
Yes, they're very intelligent. You know, they do tell you what, you know, if you're prepared to listen and watch what they're telling you, you do learn from them. I can't praise them enough. I just adore them, and that's right, isn't it? That they should tell us what to do.
Yeah, and I think it's just a great thing that we just slow down and communicate. And it seems they understand it also, but not by the intonation. So if we change the way we speak, the intonation, in fact, that's not the thing. It's all about just slowing down and just being calm. Isn't that wonderful?
Yes. And I think also it's a lot of visual as well. I think they pick up an awful lot. I think when in the morning, the dogs will know what I'm going to be doing for the day, if I'm going out, if I'm staying in. You know, they pick up on so many things that we do, and we do work as one in the house.
Now, Debbie, I've just learned that your father was the legend, the maestro, Bruce Forsyth. What a wonderful thing. I mean, I've met Brucey a bunch of times when I used to edit a magazine called Loaded. I gave him an award as the Loaded legend. He won our first comedy award. I spent a day with your dad, and I've got to say it was magnificent. My dad has still got a photograph of me and Brucey by his front door. Your dad was an absolute treasure, an absolute joy, and you know, I grew up with Brucey from as high as Pepper there. And when I met him, he was an absolute god to me. I mean, what a father to have.
Yeah, he was wonderful. We miss him terribly, and he was a great dog lover as well. I mean, he was the one who got us all started. We've all got dogs, had dogs all our lives. And he actually was responsible for getting my stolen dogs back home. So he became the godfather, dog father to us all.
Superb stuff. And he even laughed at my joke. You know, I was so nervous about introducing a comedy award to your dad. I thought, what do I do? So, do you know what? I went to the greengrocers and I got a pear. And I said, you get nothing for a pear, not in this game. And your dad looked at me and I knew my joke was really bad. But he went, well, great, great, great. And he even kind of, you know, ushered me along. So, you know what? Wonderful, wonderful talent. And thank you so much for joining us on the show. Debbie Matthews and, of course, Pepper. Thank you so, so much. Wonderful. Thank you. Have a great day. Now, coming up, Keir Starmer is in Brussels today as part of his so-called reset with the European Union. But will he buckle to Brussels? That's the big question. Is today the day Brexit finally died? I'm Martin Daubney, GB News.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome to your GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Well, we've got a cold night ahead with some frost and fog in places, but as we head into tomorrow, plenty of fine and settled weather for many. The south will have to wait though for that as we head into this afternoon. Still plenty of cloud here as low pressure dominates, but as high pressure builds from the north, that's bringing us that fine and settled weather. As I say though, as we head into this evening, there will still be some cloud across the south and southeast and still a few showers feeding into some east and southeastern coasts, but these will generally ease away as we head overnight. And this leaves plenty of clear skies overnight as well. So it is going to be turning cold and we're likely to see some fog, particularly in northern rural spots, and likely to see some frost by the time we wake up tomorrow as well. So to start tomorrow, as I say, most of that cloud generally breaking through the course of the night, but still some showers just feeding in to the southeast coast still by the time we reach tomorrow morning. But elsewhere, plenty of clear skies, so plenty of fog patches in places, and it will be feeling chilly with some frost in places too. But generally, largely dry, just away from those showers just feeding into the southeast coast. Tomorrow as well, we've got high pressure building, and that means generally a better day for all, largely dry and settled with plenty of sunny spells around. As I say, still the odd shower just moving into the southeast coast, but you'll probably be unlucky if you catch any of those. Generally dry, just perhaps a build of higher cloud just moving into western parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland later on into the afternoon. But with much lighter winds, generally feeling more pleasant where you do catch the sunshine. As we head into the evening as well, that cloud will continue to build in the west, perhaps some light rain here at times, but overall generally another dry night, plenty of clear spells, so more mist and fog to come and feeling cold once again too. And we are expecting a bit more of unsettled weather as we head into the weekend, so make sure you stay tuned for all the details. Bye for now.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon. Hello, I'm Jules Buckley. East of Liverpool, the Kensington Road, the A57. Now it's shut between Shield Road and Laurel Road. A collision there is causing delays just to the east of Kensington. Southbound side of the M6 from Wolverhampton at 10. It's queuing at the moment. 2 lanes coned off. Heavy back to 10A. There's a broken down lorry being recovered. Between West Lidford and East Pennard in Somerset, the A37. Now that's currently closed both ways. There's a collision causing delays. It's shut between Eastfield Lane in West Lidford and Horn-Blotton turn-off in East Pennard. And the North Circle at Chingford in London, this is the Cooks Ferry flyover, the eastbound side of the 406 is currently shut from the Cooks Ferry interchange to Hall Lane, queuing back before the A10. Severe delays, there's a collision there being recovered. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Good luck.
This Sunday, join me, Camilla Tominey, for an exclusive interview with one of the most controversial, influential and unique political figures of our time. Boris Johnson will be in studio discussing his new memoir, Unleashed, the gripping story of how he dealt with plotting politicians, problematic princes and a pandemic. From Boris bikes to Brexit and everything else in between. This Sunday at 9:30am, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment. This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory. Don't miss My Big Opinion. Mark meets and My Take at 10. Democracy is a funny old thing. And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it. Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it. That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hey, very good afternoon to you. It's 4 p.m. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GB News. We're broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. On today's show, Sir Keir Starmer is in Brussels as part of his reset with the European Union. Now, the EU wants Britain to accept tens of thousands of asylum seekers per year. Will Sir Keir Starmer buckle to Brussels? Is today the day that Brexit finally died? We'll be live from the EU throughout today's show, and later I'll be joined by the Brexit guard dog, Ben Habib. And today, the final 4 leadership candidates made their pitch to a packed Conservative Party conference. But the big question is this: why didn't they deliver on any of the things they're promising today while they were in power for the past 14 years? Or the Tories, all mouth and no trousers? Well, former Chancellor of the Exchequer, George Osborne, told GB News which leadership hopeful he thinks should win.
James cleverly did the best speech and had the best audience reaction. And that's interesting because I think anyone observing the contest would say he probably came into the conference maybe in 3rd or 4th place.
Centrist back centrist. Meanwhile, Benjamin Netanyahu warns Iran it will pay for last night's missile attacks on Israel. And this as the IDF, Israel, sends more troops into southern Lebanon. How will Israel retaliate? And has this latest escalation in the Middle East raised a domestic terror threat here in the United Kingdom? Well, to show, always a pleasure to have your company. Well, in about 1 hour's time, Sir Keir Starmer is expected to address the European Union and, of course, the world, telling us what his great reset with Brussels means. Now, Brussels want, of course, more concessions from the UK on fishing, on borders, on accepting freedom of movement for under 30s. Would that be a betrayal of Brexit, a surrender? Does it prove we never really got Brexit done? Let me know your thoughts. And, of course, we'll have that reaction live in today's show with reaction from Ben Habib. You'll not want to miss it. Get in touch, gbnews.com/you'll say. But now here's your headlines with Cameron Walker.
Good afternoon. The top stories from the GB newsroom. The Labour peer at the centre of a row over donations to Sir Keir Starmer is under investigation by the Lord's Standards watchdog. Lord Wahid Ali is accused of alleged non-registration of interests, leading to a possible breach of the member's code of conduct. It comes after a backlash over tens of thousands of pounds worth of gifts was accepted by the Prime Minister from the peer, who is a major Labour Party donor. Police in Denmark have confirmed that an explosion outside the Israeli embassy in Copenhagen was caused by hand grenades. There are no injuries reported, and it's too early to say how big the blast had been, according to a police spokesperson. Police in Sweden, meanwhile, have also confirmed that loud bangs outside the Israeli embassy in Stockholm last night were the result of gunfire aimed at the building. There are fears the Middle East is on the cusp of an all-out war after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu swore that Iran will pay for the large-scale missile attack it launched on Israel yesterday evening. Britain's Defence Secretary John Healey has reiterated calls for a ceasefire in Lebanon to bring the fighting to an end.
Well, I said to Israeli Minister Gallant this morning, we totally condemn the Iranian missile attack. We continue to support steadfast their right to security, but our biggest concern is to avoid this conflict spiralling out of control and into a wider regional war. And our view remains, and I made this argument to him, that the best route to scale back the fighting is for a ceasefire in Lebanon and to back a UN plan for a negotiated settlement.
All four Tory leadership candidates have given their speeches on the final day of the party conference in Birmingham. Shadow Security Minister Tom Tugendhat saying the Tories have led the fight for freedom. The Conservative candidate said he had enough of lack of principle and clarity. Mr Tugendhat said the general election was bruising and that the Tories needs to restore trust as he set out his pitch to be the party's next leader.
Leadership is not about empty promises. It's not about cheap rhetoric or government by management consultancy. It's not about managing decline, and it's not about talking our country down. Leadership is about making choices that serve our country and our people best. I promise you that as your leader, I will serve our country. I will lead with conviction. I will act decisively. My mission is the prosperity and happiness of the British people. Together, we can win.
James Cleverly opened his speech at the Conservative Party conference with an apology to members, adding that the parliamentary wing of the party had let them down.
Sorry on behalf of the Conservative Parliamentary Party who let you down. And we have to be better, much better. And under my leadership, we will be. The British people are never wrong. The British people told us to go and sort ourselves out. Let's not make them tell us again.
Robert Jenrick said the Tories need to create a new Conservative Party that is built on the rock of our proudest traditions and noblest values. Mr Jenrick said we must stand for our nation, our culture and our identity.
Why is it that so much of the British establishment seems to put Britain last? I'm told that we only have enough munitions to last a few weeks in war. And yet our country is giving foreign aid to parts of the world richer than our own. So if I am your leader, I will stand for cutting our bloated foreign aid budget and for spending 3% of GDP on our defence.
Kemi Badenoch has vowed to make the Chancellor wriggle and the Prime Minister sweat. She rounded up the speeches, adding young Conservatives had been let down by the party.
A new political force has risen, something I have been fighting all my political career: identity politics. Like the 1970s, we face a battle of ideas against the left and its desire for ever greater social and economic control. It is socialism returned, socialism in a suit.
Sir Keir Starmer says he wants to put the UK-EU relationship back on a stable, positive footing as he met European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen in Brussels. Von der Leyen said the close alignment on international matters was a good foundation for talks on the UK-EU relationship. The Prime Minister is in Brussels to meet the European Union chiefs with a promise to put the Brexit years behind us and form a closer relationship with the bloc. He aims to push for a better trading relationship and greater cooperation on the defence and security measures. It's his first visit to Brussels as Prime Minister. And a Metropolitan Police marksman has gone on trial over the fatal shooting of Chris Caber. 40-year-old Martin Blake is accused of the murder of 24-year-old Mr Caber in South London in September 2 years ago. He died after being shot once in the head through the windscreen of an Audi car in Streatham. Blake has denied the charge against him. His trial is expected to go on for up to 3 weeks. Well, those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Cameron Walker. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Cameron. Now, Sir Keir Starmer is in Brussels today as part of his reset with the European Union. The EU wants, apparently, Britain to accept tens of thousands of asylum seekers per year as part of a returns deal, plus open borders for under-30s and greater access to British fishing waters. The big question is this: will Starmer buckle to Brussels? Is today the day that Brexit finally dies? Well, joining me now is the Chief Executive of European Movements UK, Sir Nick Harvey. Sir Nick, absolute delight to have you in the show. A lot of Brexiteers are nervous today, anxious that the democratic mandate of 17.4 million was never really done by the Conservatives. There were holes in the withdrawal agreement. There were certainly holes in the Windsor framework, which allowed precisely this kind of wiggle room for a future government. Sir Keir Starmer is in Brussels today. What would you like to see coming out of today's meeting?
Well, I think regardless of how people vote or felt about Brexit in the first place, the one thing most people agree on is that it really isn't working out very well. And therefore, I think Keir Starmer is absolutely right to have said he wants to press a reset on relations with the EU. One of the things driving this is, of course, the fact that we have war in mainland Europe. And Europe is going to have to do more on its own account in terms of its future security. And we can't avoid the basic geography. The UK is part of Europe. And if we're going to defend ourselves as a continent and stand up to Russian aggression, we are going to have to work more closely with our European allies.
That's what NATO's for.
Yeah, this is in the context of NATO, but Europe's got to do more within NATO because we can't expect America to just keep bailing us out the whole time.
But NATO's job, as spending also part of our GDP on defence, we already do that. We don't have the European Union to defend us against Russia. NATO does.
There are 50 states in Europe. Many of them are part of NATO, but because they do things in 50 different ways, we are not contributing as much to NATO as we should.
I agree, neither do the Germans.
Nor are we doing as much as the Americans want us to do. So Europe's got to get its act together, and it gets its act together by working in union, not by working as 50 separate nations.
So Nick, you'd like to see then today a concession or a more alignment on defence. Well, that's the European army we were told was a dangerous fantasy.
You've just made the point yourself. NATO is the model here. NATO shows that you can have countries cooperating on defence without forming a single army. I'm not talking about forming a single army. I don't think the European Union are. I'm sure Keir Starmer isn't. I'm talking about a more effective organisation of Europe within NATO and getting more bangs for our buck. Europe is the third largest defence spender in the world after America and China, but we don't get very good value for it because it's all over the place and it needs pulling together.
Well, the European Union does want an EU army because I was at Ursula von der Leyen's maiden speech in 2019 when she precisely said that was one of her mandates.
Well, I can guarantee you it's not what Keir Starmer's going to sign up to. There's no way he's going there looking for a European army.
Well, good. At least on that we can agree. Let's turn our attention to freedom of movement, open borders. One of the much mooted ideas is that if we want anything out of the EU, Michel Barnier, masterful negotiator, from the very beginning, he out-tricked us. Yeah. He absolutely did out-trick us at the time. Masterful negotiator said no cherries. If you want anything from us, freedom of movement or some form of open borders is the price. Let's talk about the first option, a potential tens of thousands of asylum seekers coming into the UK if we want to do any sort of returns deal from, say, for example, those coming to our coast from France.
I mean, I think this is a decision we have to make a national sovereign judgment on. If we want to have the cooperation of the EU and our neighbours in taking people back, then it's not entirely unexpected that they're going to want something in exchange for that. And, I mean, to be honest with you, whether we take a quota from them or do what the last government did, of just pluck some number out of the air as a target and then completely miss it, it doesn't make that much difference.
But, Sir Nick, if the European Union cannot control their own borders, which they manifestly can't...
No, indeed.
Germany has got 2.2 illegal immigrants in the last 9 years. Why should Britain take a share of that? We left the EU.
Because people come through mainland Europe to
Well, they
get
should be stopped
to get to the British borders. And, I mean, it's a choice. We either cooperate with the Europeans or we try and do it on our own. But it's as bad as King Canute trying to do it on our own. The reality is the migrants that come to our shores have come through mainland Europe.
That is true.
And we either work with them or we don't. It's a decision that we can make.
OK, let's turn now to the next idea that's been mooted, and that's the under-30s freedom of movement work plan. I'm assuming you'd like to see that happen too.
I certainly would like to see that happen. It's certainly not freedom of movement. Freedom of movement is something which is unrestricted. A youth mobility scheme is something that is time-limited, and it's something that's for specific purposes. It would be very positive. I think British young people have had the right taken away as a result of Brexit to travel freely, work freely, study freely in the European Union. And we find that when we ask the public this in polls, that as long as it is a reciprocal arrangement, people would support this, and that includes people who voted for Brexit, includes people in the Red Wall, it includes people who voted for reform.
But when you look at the numbers, Sir Nick, the fact of the matter is it's one-way traffic. There are about 6.1 million EU nationals that applied for the settlement scheme to remain in the UK. There are less than 1 million Brits living in the entire 27 EU member states, if you exclude Ireland. So it's one-way traffic.
No.
If we have a youth deal, more people come here than would ever go to Europe from Britain.
No. You're looking at a totally different thing. The people who were, I don't recognise the figures, but the people who were there...
Well, they're ONS figures.
Over the period of decades, are of all ages, and they're largely people who've retired. A youth mobility scheme is something we have with Australia, we have it with New Zealand, we have it with America.
Numbers in comparison. Australia is one nation. This is 27 member states. It's guaranteed to be a much bigger number coming into Britain than we would get going back to the EU. And it goes back to one of the pre-Brexit things of under 30s, largely unskilled work, hammering British working classes in hospitality, in bricklaying, in those sort of jobs.
Come
That's
on, Martin.
why people voted to take back control.
You're as aware as I am that the hospitality sector, the agriculture sector, the bricklayers and everybody else are desperate for more labour. And if we could have some young Europeans coming in here, we get a huge economic benefit from that.
And if they could pay Brits more rather than be dependent on cheap foreign labour.
Who are all these people? We've got a chronic labour shortage.
They're on the dole.
Who is on the dole who would be capable of filling these jobs? I mean, we've got the lowest unemployment levels we've ever had. We've got a desperate labour shortage, and politicians need to say this loud and clear. The reason people come in is not because of social engineering, it's because our capitalist economy desperately needs more labour.
It does. It's reliant on cheap labour. So, Nick Harvey, please stick with us, because we're going to have a quick look now at the Conservative leadership candidates. Moving on, because all four of the Conservative leadership candidates, you're groaning already, have made their final rallying calls to voters today. Entering the stage first was Tom Tugendhat. He focused on creating a Conservative revolution to drive growth, stating migration has cost us too much in the last 30 years. He even adopted David Cameron's famous 100,000 cap on net migration.
But a cap alone won't work. This is about visas, not about foreign courts. Let me tell you something that my opponents probably won't. This isn't simple. We issued the visas because businesses need the staff for our care homes and our hospitals to look after our families. So how do we square this circle? Well, we need to fix migration, by fixing the gaps in education and skills, in transport and in housing, so that we can recruit at home and not abroad.
But there was one man who was quite proud of the Conservative Party legacy, Shadow Home Secretary James Cleverly. He reminded Conference the Tories delivered Brexit. And he wanted to make sure that everyone remembered his own record in government.
You have to be willing to be tough. It's why, within weeks of becoming Home Secretary, I introduced immigration controls that are now cutting net migration in half. I didn't complain about immigration or walk away from the challenge. I got it down by 300,000 people a year.
Dig there, I think, at Robert Jenrick. And not everyone was as positive about the past. Frontrunner that man, Robert Jenrick, admitted the country doesn't trust the Tories, saying we should never fail our people again and help to build a new Conservative Party. He went on to set out his main policies, including securing our borders.
The way to do that, we all know, is to detain and swiftly deport everyone who comes into our country illegally. But we will never do that. We will never do that. It is impossible unless we leave the European Convention on Human Rights.
And to close the show was Kemi Badenoch, and she called for renewal by taking the shackles off the economy, and she wasn't happy with the direction of the country.
A new political force has risen, something I have been fighting all my political career: identity politics. Like the 1970s, we face a battle of ideas against the left and its desire for ever greater social and economic control. It is socialism returned, socialism in a suit.
Well, they're all promising the world there, but who came out on top? Well, one former Conservative Chancellor gave his verdict. Here's George Osborne.
I think there was a clear winner, actually. And by the way, I'm not signed up to any of these candidates. I thought James Cleverly did the best speech and had the best audience reaction. And that's interesting because I think anyone observing the contest would say he probably came into the conference maybe in third or fourth place. Whether that translates into votes from MPs, which is the critical next stage, who knows? But I think he delivered the goods. And I also thought the format worked. I guess I was a bit... There's a question I had on the train coming here this morning, which is the device of giving everyone a chance to give a speech going to work in the same way it did 20 years ago with the conference in which Cameron got elected or got himself in a position where he was the front runner? And the answer is I think it did work. And the strengths and weaknesses of all the candidates was on display.
He's back, George Osborne. Now, by next week, only two will be left, and then they'll go head-to-head here on GB News on October the 17th, before the Tory membership then decides who'll become the next leader of the Conservative Party. Well, Sir Nick Harvey stuck with me throughout all of that. Through gritted teeth, I hasten to add, Sir Nick, what's your take on the runners and the riders? It seems to me a lot of them are promising things that they could have done in the past 14 years and didn't.
Well, that is certainly true. I mean, we've got two candidates here from the hard right, we've got two from the centre right, and that demonstrates that the Conservative Party is on the horns of a dilemma. They lost votes at the election on the right to Reform, they lost them in the centre to the Liberal Democrats, they lost them on the left to Labour, and they may convince themselves that they can fight on all these fronts at once, but the reality is they can't. They're going to have to make some big strategic decisions on, are they going back towards the centre ground from which they have traditionally won, or are they so obsessed about the challenge of reform that they're going to veer out right to take them on that ground. And in a sense, we've got a beauty parade, my God, if you can call it that, of this rogues gallery of candidates. But it's a strategic decision they need to make as to which direction they're going to head.
And another demographic missed out there, Sir Nick, is those who simply stayed at home. The none of the abobes, the huge kind of apathy amongst the Conservative electorate. So, Nick, you rub shoulders with people in power all the time. Do you think that the Conservatives, I mean, they seem convinced that this is just a minor blip?
Yes.
Just a minor blip and they can just waltz back into power in 5 years' time. What's your take?
They do. I hear tales from the Commons tea room that's just exactly their mindset. They think it's all just been a temporary blip, that, yes, OK, they made a few mistakes in office, normal service will resume in 5 years and they'll be back. And to be honest with you, I think they just haven't woken up and smelt the coffee. And because the new government's going through a bit of a rocky patch, they're convincing themselves that this is all working for them and it's all going back into their laps. And I really don't believe a word of it.
So, Nick Harvey, excellent. Thank you for coming into the studio today. Great to have your opinions. Superb. We can disagree, but we can do it with a good spirit. Thank you. Now, US Vice President hopefuls Tim Walz and JD Vance went head-to-head in their first televised debate overnight. But who won? Well, all the brilliant analysis next. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Arlene Foster on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
It was revealed that former Prime Minister Boris Johnson had what they called a manly pep talk with Prince Harry in an attempt to persuade the Duke to stay in the UK.
Let's talk to former Royal Gardener Jack Stooks and Royal commentator Richard Fitzwilliams. Morning to you both. Richard, what do you think? Do we need to forgive and forget?
Well, firstly, I mean, they don't want to come back, and at the moment, absolutely not. I mean, you'd have a circus. Every single royal event that involved the Sussexes, you'd have the focus on them and so forth. It would, in reality, be completely impractical if you consider that in the past 4 years, they've conducted a guerrilla war against the royal family. They've done enormous damage to it.
OK, Jack, I know that over the many years you worked for Prince Charles, you got to know both of the boys very well. And you're a bit fed up with the negative way that certainly we now in the media in Britain talk about Harry.
What have they actually done that's been so awful that Britain can't let them come and go as they please? All they've done is be themselves. So Harry chose to marry Meghan. You know, everybody has an opinion, and completely everybody's entitled to that opinion, like them or loathe them. That's the opinion that people have. But they haven't been given a ban on not coming back to England. So if they want to come back to England, let them come back to England. If they don't want to come back to England, again, they don't need to. It is their lives, and that's what Harry was banging on about at the time. He just wanted to have his life.
The People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Isabel Webster. Thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 4:26. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, hundreds of you have been getting in touch so far. Of course, Keir Starmer is in Brussels. Will this be the day when he buckles to Brussels and Brexit finally dies? On fishing, a lot of you really getting passionate about fishing, and why not? Understandably, it was a great surrender to our coastal communities, giving fishing quotas to European Union member states. That was one of the big red lines for Brexiteers that once again was thrown away by Boris Johnson's government. Dean says this: if Starmer announces a deal with the EU that involves our fisheries or us taking more migrants, I can't help but wondering how much more of this people will accept. I think Sir Keir Starmer is really pushing his luck if I'm honest, Dean, all Brexiteers will no doubt concur with that. Now to America, because Vice President hopefuls Tim Walz and J.D. Vance, they went head-to-head in their first televised debate overnight. And they clashed over a range of issues, including international politics and abortion rights. Moderators at one point even muted their microphones during a heated exchange over immigration.
Have so much to get to, Senator.
Those laws have been on the books since 1990.
Thank you, gentlemen.
The
we want to have.
One app has not been on the books since 1990. It's something that Kamala Harris created, Margaret.
Gentlemen, the audience can't hear you because your mics are cut.
Well, these are muters all the time in the European Union, especially Nigel Farage. We're well used to that kind of treatment. Let's discuss this further with the chair of Republicans overseas, Greg Swenton. I'm delighted to say joins me in the studio. Greg, always an absolute pleasure. So let's just cut to the chase. Who won?
Yeah. Well, it's J.D. Vance by a mile. I mean, you'd have to give it to Kamala Harris on points in the presidential debate, not a knockout. This was almost a knockout, to say the least.
And on what particular issues do you think J.D. Vance, when he had a lot of criticism before, and of course he was talking about dogs and cats being eaten in America, and he was kind of acting like a bit of a troll, but last night he turned on the charm. We saw a very, very different Republican VP.
Absolutely. It wasn't one or two issues. I mean, I think he basically won on all of the issues. And on the Springfield, Ohio one, he handled that perfectly. And then of course you saw Tim Walz outright lie, and of course the moderators were trying to protect him. So, you know, this was a win for J.D. Vance. It was a win for the campaign, a win for the party. He won on just about every metric, or maybe all of the metrics. It puts him on the map for sure. It also changed the narrative that J.D. Vance, you know, that the media created around J.D. Vance, that he, you know, they dug up some old tapes on him. They made him sound like he hated women, he hated everybody. And, you know, that's the media activists in the U.S. that were trying to create that. And he dispelled that completely. He just gave suburban women permission to vote for Trump.
And I think one of the telling tales that the Republicans did pretty well is that there's been next to no media about it in Britain.
Absolutely.
There's no attack line on Trump, so they've gone a bit stum.
Yeah, it's only good to cover Trump when Trump's in trouble or there's bad news about Trump. So, you know, many of us were booked for media, and it's interesting that all of the legacy media dropped us after the results came in.
Is that true?
Absolutely, it's true.
Well, so they wanted to get you in if the Republicans had a bad night, but when they had a good night, you weren't booked.
They didn't say it that way, but they booked us ahead of time because it was well, you know, anticipated. And then it's interesting. Now, I know there's big news in Lebanon and the Middle East. I get that. But last night I was on a few times, you know, pregame. And then it's just interesting how, you know, my guess, and I'm just guessing, I can't prove it, but, you know, that if J.D. Vance had fallen on his face and talked about cat ladies and eating dogs, we would not have been dropped. And it wasn't just me, it was many of us. So.
There's an extraordinary moment, and part of me wanted to die for Mr. Walz there when he was called out. He basically lied that he was at Tiananmen Square for that epic moment, that unforgettable moment of Chinese democracy. He wasn't there. He told a complete pork pie. He was caught out.
Right, and it's happened to him on many occasions about his war record, about he slipped again last night, stating that this law was not, you know, has been in place, you know, since 1990. He slips up quite a bit. It wasn't a good, and good for you and GBNews for actually covering it, even though he won, or J.D. Vance won, and in a sense, Trump won. So good for you for doing that. I know that, you know, Jennifer was dropped a few times. Sarah was not even called. I was dropped a few times. It's an interesting conclusion to draw.
Now, Greg, obviously, they're not the presidential candidates. How important are these things in America? Do they actually sway any voters, or is it largely just a spectacle and there's talk about people like you and I?
Yeah, it's a great question. Quite often, the vice presidential debate just doesn't matter, and it's an afterthought. This year is different, though, for a few reasons. One is it's a really short campaign. You know, Biden wasn't kicked to the curb until late July, so it's a really short presidential campaign. Two, it's really close, and so I think this can move the needle. If J.D. Vance again gave permission to people, he came off as a really nice guy, genuine, super smart. the guy finished college in 2 years. It's usually 4 in the U.S., and at some schools 5, and then went to Yale Law School. He's a smart guy. He came off as brilliant. He came off as likable. He was graceful. And so I think this is going to flip. And you don't need to move many people. All you need to move is a few thousand in the key states.
It's worth pointing out, not everybody agrees with you. A CBS poll carried out straight after the debate only had Waltz 1% behind J.D. Vance.
That's really interesting. I was amazed at how many mainstream media outlets came out admitting that J.D. Vance won. That might have been the exception. I didn't see that. But I think that it was a pretty clear victory for J.D. You saw a lot of legacy media people come out and say, not a good night for Tim Walz. They're not going to come out cheering for Donald Trump ever, all right? So you have to always take it with a grain of salt. But I think the outcome was pretty clear.
OK, Greg Spencer, thank you very much for joining me. As always, an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks, man.
Lots more still to come between now and 5 o'clock, including a former Defence Secretary who will tell me whether we ought to be worried about a potential terror attack on British soil after explosions were heard near the Israeli embassy in Copenhagen and also in Stockholm. But first, here's your latest news headlines with Cameron Walker.
Good afternoon. It's 3:30. I'm Cameron Walker in the GB Newsroom. The Labour peer at the centre of a row over donations in Sir Keir Starmer is under investigation by the Lord's Standards watchdog. Lord Wahid Ali is accused of alleged non-registration of interests, leading to a possible breach of the Members' Code of Conduct. It comes after a backlash over tens of thousands of pounds worth of gifts was accepted by the Prime Minister from Lord Peer, who is a major Labour Party donor. Police in Denmark has confirmed that an explosion outside the Israeli embassy in Copenhagen was caused by hand grenades. There are no injuries reported, and it is too early to say how big the blast has been, according to the police spokesperson. Police in Sweden, though, have also confirmed that loud bangs outside the Israeli embassy in Stockholm last night were the result of gunfire aimed at the building. Meanwhile, there are fears that the Middle East is on the cusp of an all-out war after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu swore that Iran will pay for the large-scale missile attack it launched on Israel yesterday evening. Sir Keir Starmer says he wants to put the UK-EU relationship back on a stable, positive footing as he met European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen in Brussels. Von der Leyen said the close alignment on international matters was a good foundation for talks on the UK-EU relationship. The Prime Minister is in Brussels to meet the European Union chiefs with a promise to put Brexit years behind us and form a close relationship with the bloc. He aims to push for a better trading relationship and greater cooperation on defence and security measures. It's his first visit to Brussels as Prime Minister. The Conservative leadership candidates have reflected on their general election defeat in their final speeches at the party's conference in Birmingham. Tom Tugendhat, James Cleverly, Robert Jenrick and Kemi Badenoch are all appealing to members in their bids to replace Rishi Sunak. After their speeches, the former Conservative Chancellor George Osborne gave his verdicts on the candidates' performances.
James Cleverly did the best speech and had the best audience reaction. And that's interesting because I think anyone observing the contest would say he probably came into the conference maybe in 3rd or 4th place.
And the Duke of Sussex has called for people at the top to start listening in order to make a difference as he joined a chat around a bonfire on a trip to Lesotho. Prince Harry reunited with his close friend Prince Siso, who described the Duke as my younger brother, the warrior. The pair co-founded the charity Centre Barley in 2006, which helps young people living with HIV and AIDS and cope with other challenges like health, wealth inequality and climate. The King's Son has travelled to the African country without his wife Meghan and plans to visit South Africa too before he returns to California. Well, those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Cameron Walker. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome to your GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Well, we've got a cold night ahead with some frost and fog in places, but as we head into tomorrow, plenty of fine and settled weather for many. The south will have to wait though for that as we head into this afternoon. Still plenty of cloud here as low pressure dominates, but as high pressure builds from the north, that's bringing us that fine and settled weather. As I say though, as we head into this evening, there will still be some cloud across the south and southeast and still a few showers feeding into some east and southeastern coasts, but these will generally ease away as we head overnight. And this leaves plenty of clear skies overnight as well. So it is going to be turning cold and we're likely to see some fog, particularly in northern rural spots, and likely to see some frost by the time we wake up tomorrow as well. So to start tomorrow, as I say, most of that cloud generally breaking through the course of the night, but still some showers just feeding in to the southeast coast still by the time we reach tomorrow morning. But elsewhere, plenty of clear skies, so plenty of fog patches in places, and it will be feeling chilly with some frost in places too. But generally, largely dry, just away from those showers just feeding into the southeast coast. Tomorrow as well, we've got high pressure building, and that means generally a better day for all, largely dry and settled with plenty of sunny spells around. As I say, still the odd shower just moving into the southeast coast, but you'll probably be unlucky if you catch any of those. Generally dry, just perhaps a build of higher cloud just moving into western parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland later on into the afternoon. But with much lighter winds, generally feeling more pleasant where you do catch the sunshine. As we head into the evening as well, that cloud will continue to build in the west, perhaps some light rain here at times, but overall generally another dry night, plenty of clear spells, so more mist and fog to come and feeling cold once again too. And we are expecting a bit more of unsettled weather as we head into the weekend, so make sure you stay tuned for all the details. Bye for now.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. If you're heading in towards Glasgow, the eastbound M8 at Erskine Bridge, junction 30 is part blocked. There's some debris on the carriageway, so watch out for that. That's your journey inside the next half an hour or so. Queues at the West Midlands for the southbound M6 at the turn for Wolverhampton and Walsall, junction 10. Now 2 lanes are coned off as a broken down lorry that gets recovered. It's heavy back towards the Cannock turn-off at junction 11. A37 in Somerset is still closed both ways between East Pennard and West Lidford and queuing. That's at the scene of a collision. And in Chingford in London, still problems on the eastbound side of the North Circle of the 406. Now a lane shut for the Cooks Ferry flyover. An earlier collision there getting recovered. Queues before the A10. Long delays through Edmonton, Tottenham and Enfield, of course, as traffic there diverts.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome back. Your time is 4:39. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now let's bring you some breaking news now. Some major breaking news about Sir Keir Starmer and the gifts he's been receiving. Of course, it was called Free Gear Keir by the press. It's just been announced that the Prime Minister paid back more than £6,000 worth of gifts and hospitality he received since entering number 10 after a row over ministerial donations. The Prime Minister is covering the cost of 6 Taylor Swift tickets, 4 to the races, and a clothing rental agreement with a high-end designer favoured by his wife, Lady Victoria Starmer. Now, it comes after Sir Keir and other cabinet members who vowed to clean up British politics, if you recall, face weeks of criticism for accepting tens of thousands of pounds worth of freebies from wealthy donors. An astonishing state of affairs. You've even got to read that out. Paying back Taylor Swift tickets. My, oh my. Moving on, Benjamin Netanyahu warns Iran it will pay for last night's missile attacks onto Israel. And this as the IDF, Israel, sends more troops into southern Lebanon. How will Israel retaliate? And has its latest escalation in the Middle East raised the domestic terror threat here in the United Kingdom? Let's get the thoughts now of the former Foreign Secretary, Sir Malcolm Rifkin. Sir Malcolm, absolute pleasure to have you on. You, of course, are one of the Goliaths of British government in the past throughout the Thatcher and the Major cabinets. And, of course, trouble in the Middle East has been going on since I was a boy. So you are no stranger to this on your watch.
Do you think, since I was a boy as well.
There we go, Sir Malcolm. So do you think that this time, though, things are different? Things feel more sinister? And in particular, Sir Malcolm, what could this mean for Britain. We're seeing right now in Copenhagen and Stockholm, the terror threats are being raised there. Over to you.
Okay. Right. I think, first of all, the issues in the Middle East are always controversial, but I think what is happening between Israel and Hezbollah is probably much less controversial in reality than the whole issue of Gaza, because there is no dispute about the facts. Hezbollah have been sending rockets into Israel over their various grievances for the last year, and Israel's had to evacuate the whole northern part of its territory. Now, no country could live with that indefinitely. And I think there will be overwhelming support. And indeed, there is support from other Arab governments. It's quite clear. I mean, Jordan yesterday, for example, was helping intercept some of the Iranian missiles. And it's well known that other countries like Egypt and the United Arab Emirates they loathe Hezbollah, as do probably more than half of the Lebanese population. So we're dealing with a different situation. That doesn't mean it isn't risky, but it means that who's right and who's wrong is much clearer than it might often be.
OK, and back to the terror threat in the UK. As I said, we're seeing incidents in Copenhagen and Stockholm at moments like this. And we had a guest on earlier who's warning that the Iranian regime has been funding and fueling the hatred on British streets throughout the pro-Palestine marches. Could this escalation in the Middle East precipitate something more sinister on our own streets?
Sure. I, for 5 years, chaired the Intelligence and Security Committee. We had oversight with MI6 and MI5, GCHQ, and therefore part of their role is to identify potential threats within the United Kingdom as well as from overseas. And we're not talking about a huge number of people, but there are always in any country a small number of fanatics, of people who have got their own prejudices and whatever, and an even smaller proportion of them are prepared to use violence and using guns. Now, fortunately, we're the sort of country where people don't have easy access to automatic weapons and things of that kind. It's not the United States where they have very poor gun laws. So it's less likely to happen, but it always can. And what we've seen over the last 20 years is the disappearance of most of the pre-planned things like, you know, the London bombings or 9/11. That's thankfully seems to have disappeared, keeping fingers very firmly crossed. But what you can't eliminate entirely is the odd individual crank or fanatic or whomsoever who will try and kill people, not just because of Middle East. We've seen this in other areas as well. So I can't give you an exact answer on that because there's none that is available.
Do you think that the rise of Islamist terrorism is one of the biggest threats currently facing the Western world, and in particular in the United Kingdom?
It has been a very major threat. But it's worth putting this in perspective. The biggest threat was when what is called Islamic State not only were carrying out terrorist acts, they had seized control of a very large part of Iraq and a large part of Syria and declared an Islamic State, an actual new country in northern Iraq and northern Syria. Now, the international community worked extremely well and has effectively destroyed Islamic State. They still exist, but they don't control any territory in the way they did then. For the threat they can pose is a serious one, but it's not one that is a threat to the stability of other countries. I think we're in a similar situation here, that these terrorists, I mean, for example, Hamas is much less of a threat to Israel than Hezbollah. Hamas is a threat. It can kill people. It can, as we saw on October the 7th last year, over 1,000 Israelis brutally slaughtered. But it can't actually damage the existence of the state itself. Hezbollah can't either, but they can do an awful lot more damage in between. Their relationship with the Iranians in particular, who virtually invented them a good number of years ago, have used them as their proxy exactly for this purpose. That is what makes Hezbollah a very serious threat because of the link with Iran. Virtually all their weapons come from Iran, and there's no secret about that.
And so, Malcolm, as I have you here, can I briefly ask you about the breaking news there? Sir Keir Starmer had to pay back £6,000 of freebies on Taylor Swift tickets. It is funny in one sense, but of course, the Labour Party always said that the Tory Party were the party of sleaze. And of course, at the end of the Major era, that became a major headache. How badly do you think the Labour Party have played this freebiegate situation, Sir Malcolm?
Well, I don't know whether to cry or to smile, because inevitably you take some pleasure in your opponent's discomfiture, but also it does no good to the reputation of the United Kingdom, quite apart reputation of the Labour government. What I'm really surprised about Starmer, I don't have any animus against him. I think he's a pretty intelligent, straightforward sort of guy. I suspect he's got a reasonable amount of integrity. What I very much question is his appalling judgment. As soon as this became an issue, he should have said then what he's saying now. This has had to be dragged out of him over the last 2 or 3 weeks. And I'm very pleased he's made this announcement. It covers, I think, 6,000 of the freebies. I'm not quite sure what happens to all the remaining ones and why Taylor Swift is being discriminated against, which seems very unfair. But that's a matter for him to explain.
Superb stuff. Thank you for sharing your insights. Absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Sir Malcolm Rifkin, thank you very much for joining us on GB News. Now, still to come, Sir Keir Starmer will shortly be speaking from Brussels, and I'll be joined by Brexit guard dog Ben Habib in the studio. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This Sunday, join me, Camilla Tominey, for an exclusive interview with one of the most controversial, influential and unique political figures of our time. Boris Johnson will be in studio discussing his new memoir, Unleashed, the gripping story of how he dealt with plotting politicians, problematic princes and a pandemic. From Boris bikes to Brexit and everything else in between. This Sunday at 9:30 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
GB News presenter Mr. Patrick Christys is going to live off £15 per week as part of his Friends of the Elderly fundraiser.
Yeah, so far Patrick's raised over £193,000 with the help of all of you at home and all of your generous donations. So thank you so much for all of that. And thank you, Patrick, for coming up with this and flying the flag, I suppose, for these people who feel as if they're being victimised at the moment. Very, very worried about the winter fuel payment. Just tell us how you set upon this £15 figure.
Yeah, absolutely. So the £15 food figure was based around a conversation I had with a pensioner called Sue in Cheshire, who told me, and our viewers, quite a horrendous story, actually, about what she has to live off every week. £15 is her food budget. Her boiler's gone. She can't afford to replace that. She's worried about whether or not she can afford to even put an electric blanket on. She is essentially too proud to actually officially ask for help. We had to really convince her to come on and tell her story so that she thought, she would do it so that she could help others, really. That's why she did it. So I thought, well, it's not absolutely freezing yet. There's things I'm going to do as it gets colder and as winter proper kicks on. So I'll do a few bits and bobs there that might be more physically demanding to raise a bit of money. But this is something I can do in the meantime. So I thought, well, I'd live off £15 a week. £13.55 to be precise. Left myself some wiggle room in case I want a can of Diet Coke or something over the course of the week. But this is the food shop that I did yesterday. I've got some lentils, a bit of couscous, a couple of tins of tuna, some tomatoes, some peppers, bit of pasta, some eggs, and a stir-fry thing that I think I'm actually going to have to eat today, because if viewers have got the impression that I'm a man who doesn't necessarily plan things through properly, they are correct, because I got this and it goes out of date tomorrow. So there you go.
The People's Channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 4:51. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, any moment now, we're expecting to hear from Sir Keir Starmer, who, of course, is in Brussels today as part of his so-called reset with the European Union. But really, is this the day when Brexit could finally die? Will Starmer buckle to Brussels? Well, I'm joined now by the Brexit guard dog, Ben Habib. And that's a nickname I know you absolutely will love, because that's what we've been doing, to be fair, all the way through since that withdrawal agreement was published on the 17th of October 2019, when you and I were colleagues in the Brexit Party, going through treaties, going through documents, analysing the fine print, looking for potential ways back through the cat flap. Ben Habib, on that day in 2019, you and I both spotted ways back on fishing, on the Irish border, on the level playing field, on taxation. The cat flap was left open by Boris Johnson, and now Sir Keir Starmer is in Brussels. What do you think is going to happen today, and how do you think we got to this point?
It's funny you mention, if I can just say, the 17th of October, because it's a date that's emblazoned on my mind. When we got that draft withdrawal agreement, and after all the table thumping that Boris Johnson had done about delivering Brexit, over his dead body would he, would Brexit be betrayed, etc. You and I both read the agreement straight away, and I think you were on Question Time later that day, weren't you?
Yeah, the paper was still warm.
The paper was still warm, and we saw instantly that actually we were going to be hitched at the regulatory hip with the EU. We were going to give up our fishing waters. Northern Ireland was going to become annexed by the European Union. And by the way, our military was also going to be hitched at the hip with the European Defence Union. And so since that moment, we've had to fight it. And sadly, the withdrawal agreement was put in place. Boris Johnson got that thumping majority, in significant part because the Brexit Party stood down against the Tories. And now we have been fighting this rearguard action to try and get Brexit properly done. We haven't got it done. That has opened up the opportunity for Starmer now to go back to the European Union. And these concessions that we've heard mooted by Ursula von der Leyen, giving up fishing for beyond 2026, giving freedom of movement to the youth, this closer military cooperation and so on. These are not concessions she's going to be giving us in return for anything that we get. That's not how it works with the European Union. These are all concessions that Starmer will willingly give up and get absolutely nothing in return. The only way to have really got out of the European Union was to leave with no deal. No deal was the best deal. And what our politicians had to have done back in 2017 through to 2019 was get this country fighting fit, both on the international trade stage as well as domestically, to compete with, if necessary, a belligerent European Union when it comes to trade. Fine. You want a trade war because we want to become independent, because we want to exercise our democratic right to be independent? Well, let's have it. We'll deregulate, we'll cut taxes, we'll take all our fish back, we'll jettison the ECHR, we'll put up our borders, and let's have it out with you. That's what we should have done in 2019. We didn't do it, and we're still fighting the same battle.
And Ben, that didn't happen. In fact, none of the Project Fear happened either. In fact, imports and exports to the European Union have increased since Brexit. So the sky didn't come crashing in, which begs the question even more. Why would we want to give any more concessions back if it's worked out OK?
Well, Starmer in my book is anti-British, and the reason I say he's anti-British is because he seeks for the United Kingdom to be governed by a foreign power. He's prepared and willing and desirous to take down our borders. And he was caught off camera, you might recall this, Martin, in September 2023 in Montreal. He thought the cameras weren't off him. And he said, actually, if I become Prime Minister, I'm going to take us into very close regulatory alignment with the EU. On the trade front, we all said it many, many times, just to remind viewers, at worst it was going to be a bit of an extra charge because you want to buy a German car. And the reality was we needed to check European imports into this country because we were running a £100 billion trade deficit, largely because of those German cars. Everything could have been fixed. We could have become the nimble, independent, prosperous, sovereign nation that we should be, and instead our politicians threw us under a bus, and Starmer's going to make it even worse.
Let's look at some of the detail that's on the table today. So the notion, Barnier was a masterful negotiator, wasn't he? They said at the time, no cherries on the cake. It was a one-way ratchet. One of the things that Barnier said subsequently is that any renegotiation will involve the United Kingdom having to accept a quota of asylum seekers from the European Union. The European Union cannot control its own borders. 27 member states. There are more than 2.2 million illegal immigrants in Germany alone. Now, the Labour government have said no way will they countenance such a deal. But you know, as I do, Brussels say, well, you might say that, but I'm afraid here comes the rough end of the pineapple. They want us to accept asylum seekers as part of our deal. Do you think that there's any way that Keir Starmer could relent and accept that?
Starmer will willingly do it. I mean, you say that the Europeans can't control their borders. They don't want borders. The European Union doesn't want... It's taken them down. One of the reasons we have such a problem with illegal migration is because there are literally no borders in Europe because of the Schengen zone. Once you land in Italy, you're at Calais within the time it takes to get there by train or some other mode of transport. The Germans are waking up to it.
They are.
They're putting their borders back in place. But this is a pernicious scheme. This resettlement of illegal migrants is a pernicious scheme. And the reason I say that is, well, first of all, it effectively legalises illegal migration. Yeah. What it signals to the people smugglers and the would-be people that they would trade is that you can enter Europe illegally, but actually we will then settle you legally somewhere. They're telling them that if you can make it in, you'll be saved. And that is encouraging more people to come to Europe and to the United Kingdom. So it's pernicious at that level. It's also pernicious, and we mustn't forget this. When people enter our country, it's basic, but we mustn't forget it. When people enter our country without papers, of whom we know nothing, they could be criminal, they could be terrorist, many are. And we are taking them into our bosom, if you like, into civil British society, and exposing ourselves to assault. I call that uncivilised. And just going back to my comment on Starmer being anti-British, when you take down your borders and you expose your country to that kind of assault, that is fundamentally anti the national interest. If you're doing things willingly that are against the national interest, you must be against the nation state. And this is the problem also with the European project. They eschew nation states. That's why they've taken down borders. They don't want France to be France or Germany to be Germany and Italy to be Italy. They want all those borders gone and they want Brussels in charge. And that is what Starmer is chasing. He's chasing his misplaced belief in some global order and some European order, which he thinks will be for the prosperity of Europe and the globe, over and above and to the detriment of this country. And we've got to stop it. The cry from the British people in 2016 was, please, for goodness sake, start governing the United Kingdom with the interests of the United Kingdom and British citizens at heart. Stop doing it for other nefarious reasons.
OK, so Sir Keir Starmer would no doubt argue that today he is protecting British interests or trying to increase them on the world stage. One of his ideas is the youth mobility scheme. So the ability of under-30s in the European Union and the UK to choose where they would like to work. Now, as I remember, taking back control of our workforce was a primary driver, particularly amongst the working classes across Britain. It's OK to say, oh, you know, a few people can go to university in Barcelona, but the fact of the matter is it tends to be, Ben Habib, one-way traffic. There's 6 million EU citizens resident stayed in the United Kingdom, but there's only less than 1 million Brits live across the entire member state. So Keir Starmer would argue this is to fill sectors of employment that we can't fill with Brits. What would your response be to that?
Well, that is a fundamental vote of no confidence by the Prime Minister in the British workforce. You mentioned we've got 6 million EU member state citizens living in the UK at the moment, having settled, or I think they're all settled status now. Yeah. We've also got 6 million Brits not working. You know, we've had record migration, not just from the European Union, but from across the globe. And this is a failure of government policy to have an industrial and labour policy for the United Kingdom that actually makes it worthwhile for people to get into work. I don't buy the notion that Brits won't do certain jobs and that we've got to bring people into this country. I don't buy that. If you pay someone a fair wage for a fair day's work and they're allowed to keep that which they earn legitimately in their back pockets, they will come to work. What we've done in this country, and by the way, the root cause is the European Union, is over-regulate, overtax, overburden our small and medium-sized enterprises, made it very difficult for people to make a fair wage, undermine their wages with cheap imported labour, and then whatever little wage they get, tax it to hell. I mean, that is no recipe to get the British worker back into the workplace.
But of course, Sir Keir Starmer would say, well, the Brits don't want to do the work. They don't want to pick potatoes or strawberries or do that work. What would your response be to that?
I disagree. Make it worthwhile, allow their wages to grow, don't tax them to hell on it, and allow those farmers and so on that are growing these potatoes also similarly to flourish so that they can all pay on. You know, farmers are under real pressure at the moment, in part because of net zero, because of the cost of all their fuel and everything else going up, which is another EU-born ideological project which is so damaging to the United Kingdom. So many ills come out of Europe, and if we had just Brexited properly, if we can Brexit now properly, take back control to this country and jettison these ridiculous policies that have come to us from Europe, we'd be such a prosperous country.
The problem with that, though, is that we won't get a second chance even. Like Keir Starmer wanted a second vote. He was the people's vote champion. But now perhaps something more pernicious is happening, and that is they won't put it to the people again, but there'll just be death by 1,000 treaties. Do you think that's the way it's going, particularly, Ben Habib? Fishing, once again, astonishingly, is on the table. Now, when we Brexited at the time, you and I at the time went through those quotas, and it was, by any reckoning, not what people thought we were getting. Taking back control of our sovereign waters was absolutely fundamental, something tangible, particularly to the coastal communities that were on their knees. They were just decimated from the 1970s onwards. The common market was just common bad news for our coastal destinations. Fishing, once again, could be up for grabs. And, Ben Habib, you can only feel, once again, this will be a one-way ratchet. We'll have to give more away.
We will give more away, and we will allow them to do more damage to our fishing waters. The European Union wraps itself up in a cloak of environmental friendliness, which is completely false. And you can see that when you look at the way that they fish our waters. They turn up with these massive trawlers. They electrocute all sorts of fish, everything within a square mile. Then they'll fish out that which they're allowed to keep, which they will have to have audited and so on when they go back to port, and they throw everything else dead back into the water. That, and they dredge up, you know, the areas of at the seabed where fish lay their spawn and so on. The EU is a mercantilist, exploitative entity when it comes to resources, including our fish. And the 2026 deal was bad enough with the EU. I know Remainers used to say, oh, get off the fishing thing. It's only 0.7% of GDP. Well, actually, it's 186 coastal constituencies we have in this country. And it would be 3% of GDP if we kept the fishing rights for those coastal communities. And remember, when you've got a vibrant fishing industry out at sea, you get vibrant industry on land, because you've got to process the fish, you've got to sell it and so on. So that was a massive give up by Boris Johnson to the European Union. It's obviously up for further grabs at the moment.
And it's also worth pointing out that as a percentile of those coastal communities, it's a huge part of their enterprise. And that was the point. You know, coastal towns, in fact, many of which have fallen to reform in the recent election, 5 of them, well, 4, including Ashfield. Fishing is absolutely sort of central to the mindset. The quotas are up for grabs 2026, and back to that withdrawal agreement, back to the protocol. Fishing is, as you know, it's enmeshed. Anything else we try and unpick, if we try and unpick fishing, the EU will say, well, you can't do that.
Absolutely.
Because if you want something back on fishing, then you lose here, and here. Spell that out for us.
Yeah, so the agreement on fishing, basically, it's a lie, by the way, when, you know, another lie from Boris Johnson, when he said that we get total control back of our fishing waters in 2026. We don't. What happens is that the quotas that are established for 2026 go on in perpetuity. We could unilaterally vary them, but then there are punitive impositions on us by the European Union. For example, we give up the right for our lorries to drive across Europe in order to pick up goods and bring them back to the UK.
Data exchange, I mean, basically everything. Everything in the protocol falls apart if we decide to say no on one point, right?
Yeah, and aviation. We won't be able to fly our jets into Europe, which would be interesting, because we had this debate back in 2017, 2018. We could just block planes flying over Ireland in that case. And that would make transatlantic flying quite interesting for the European Union. But, I mean, the whole thing, actually, Martin, fundamentally is born out of a political class that hasn't got a backbone, that doesn't believe in the nation-state of the United Kingdom, and isn't prepared to stand up for British national interests. That's what the awful Brexit deal reflects. It's a political class that doesn't care for this country, and we've got to get rid of them. We've got to change the people in Westminster and get in a decent set of politicians who actually are capable, believe in this country, and wish to promote this country.
Now, if you're just joining us here on GB News, we are waiting to hear from Sir Keir Starmer. He is in Brussels today. He's been in meetings for most of the day with Ursula von der Leyen and other top brass at the EU. We're expecting an announcement from Sir Keir Starmer imminently. In fact, he's already a few minutes late. Perhaps he's having his extra croissant in the canteens there, as we used to do so often, Ben. They can't get their nose out of those free buffets once they get going in Brussels, Ben.
We could jump the queue. Do you remember? If you had our badge, you could jump the queue.
You certainly could. Champagne, lobsters, subsidised bars, the whole shebang. But on a serious point, Sir Keir Starmer has said that Brexit has been done and we're not going to unpick it. He said time and time again, we will not betray the vote. Do you believe him?
No, of course not. I mean, as I mentioned, he was caught on camera thinking he was off camera in Montreal just a year ago, saying that he would align us very closely with the EU if he became Prime Minister. The man is a Europhile through and through. He thinks and breathes Brussels. He doesn't think and breathe Westminster. When he was asked by Emily Maitlis, where would you rather be, Davos or Westminster? There was no hesitation. He said Davos. What kind of Prime Minister of this country would choose Davos over Westminster?
And it's pretty hard to think of any Brexiteers, any key Brexiteers within the Labour Party, certainly not in the Cabinet. There are no ministers I can think of that were Brexiteers. So the direction of travel, I know you're looking very perplexed. But
no, I'm trying to think.
Just spelling out, in terms of the political makeup of this Labour government, I mean, the Brexiteers are very, very thin on the ground.
Yeah, I mean, I can't name a single Brexiteer left in the Labour Party. Perhaps there are parliamentary members who are pro-Brexit. Yeah, but the funny thing here, though, you know, just musing for a bit while we wait for Sir Keir to come on, is that Labour should be a more interventionist form of government. And Labour should therefore wish to have a free hand with state aid rules, for example. And it should wish to be able to buy British first and promote British workers and British business. And under the agreement we have with the EU, of course, we can't do any of that.
Yeah, and a huge part back in the day was why not be able to subsidise British industry, for example, British steel. We've just seen this week, you know, Tata Steel, I think actually we've now got Sir Keir Starmer. We can cross live to Brussels. Here is the Prime Minister taking to the stage.
I've just had a very productive meeting with Ursula von der Leyen, President of the European Commission. First, we took part in a call with fellow G7 members where we all condemned Iran's abhorrent attack on Israel last night. We agreed on the importance of Israel's security and right to defend itself in the face of this unacceptable aggression. And we call on all sides to show restraint and avoid escalating further. No one wants a regional war. We also agreed on the urgency of ceasefires in Lebanon and Gaza to allow the space for political solutions. And last night's events have highlighted more than ever that at a time of escalating conflict, including Russia's ongoing invasion in Ukraine, it is vitally important that we ensure we work ever more closely with our partners and allies in the pursuit of peace and security. Ursula and I have agreed that we can do more together in a few key areas in particular: promoting growth and prosperity, working together on shared challenges like climate change, energy security, and illegal migration, and strengthening our shared security and stability. So we're putting our relationship with Europe on a more solid stable footing. That's what the British people want, a return to pragmatic, sensible leadership when it comes to dealing with our closest neighbours, because they know that this matters for growth, for jobs, and for security. The detailed work to take this forward starts now. We've agreed to hold regular UK-EU summits at leader level to review progress, starting with a summit in the first half of next year. Now, of course, there will be issues which are difficult to resolve, and on areas on which we will stand firm. There will be no return to freedom of movement, no return to the customs union, no return to the single market. But we will find constructive ways to work together and deliver for the British people. And now I'd like to take some questions, I think, starting with Katya.
Sorry. Thank you, Prime Minister. Prime Minister, improved music really only goes so far. What trade-offs are you willing to make with the EU, because they'll ask for them, in order to improve economic relations? They've asked for a youth mobility scheme, for example. And if you forgive me, Prime Minister, you've decided to repay £6,000 worth of gifts. Why now? Why those gifts and not all of them? Have you decided it was wrong to take them, or did you come under pressure?
Well, on the question of the discussions I've had this afternoon with the President, with Ursula, tone does matter. Resetting does matter, and that has been a very important part of the message that I have carried into the meeting today. A return to pragmatism, to doing business in a respectful way, and in a way which I think will focus on deliverables rather than charging to the nearest camera to use a megaphone. So that does matter. In terms of the details of the challenges, look, of course there'll be challenges along the way, but this was about a good faith step forward to constructive deliverables, which I think are achievable. The nature of the discussion wasn't in the sort of individual items. It was much more sort of setting the framework for the summits that will follow. In relation to your second question, look, we came in as a government of change. We are now going to bring forward principles for donations, because until now, politicians have used their best individual judgment on a case-by-case basis. I think we need some principles of general application. So I took the decision that until the principles are in place, it was right for me to make those repayments. Thank you. I'll go to Adam.
Thank you. Adam Parsons from Sky News. Prime Minister, a couple, if I may. Lord Ali is facing an investigation. I wonder how concerned you are that your biggest donor was not fully transparent with the British public. And also, this statement is full of good intentions, but very short of any concrete proposals. Just on one, lots of people would like to see an agreement about youth mobility, giving young people the chance to move into Europe, to spend some time there. Would you like to see that, and what progress has been made?
Well, look, I'm not going to comment on the Lord Ali investigation. It'll run its course. On the nature of the discussions today and the points you put to me, I mean, firstly, on youth mobility, I've answered and put our position pretty clearly on a number of occasions. But that really wasn't the nature of today's debate. Today's debate was the first step down to a path which will then lead to negotiations to the summit in the early part of next year, and focused on the deliverables and what we can do rather than what we can't do. But by its very nature, it was not a discussion that went into the details at this stage. It was about setting the parameters, setting the tone, agreeing how this would be done, and the sort of milestones, if you like, along the way. And in that sense, it was very constructive, positive, and with evident good faith on both sides. Thank you very much. I've got Robert.
Robert Person, ITV. Prime Minister, the Israeli Prime Minister has said that he will retaliate against Iran. What is your position on whether he should. What is the G7 position on all of that? And related to that, the MOD has said that it helped Israel defend itself. Are there circumstances in which British forces would help with an attack on Iran? And then just briefly on this issue of the repayment, British voters will see you're repaying £6,000 plus of gifts as an admission by you that you were wrong to accept those gifts. Are you saying you made a mistake?
Look, on the question of Iran, I mean, we have condemned in the strongest terms the attack by Iran last night. It is not to be tolerated. I think it's very clear that we stand firm with Israel. Israel does have the right to security. Israel does have the right to defend herself. And that is absolutely clear. I'm not going to get drawn further than that, nor to get drawn on the role of our own service personnel last night. Obviously, in April, we saw the role that was taken, but I'm not going to get drawn beyond that. But that is not any indication that we're going any further on this occasion. On the repayment, I can't say any more than I did. We're going to drop some principles until they're in, which will guide everybody. Until they're in place, I thought it was right to repay these particular payments. That's the long and the short of it. Thank you. Olivia.
Olivia Robbie, GB News. Just on the specifics of a potential reset deal with the EU, can you rule out granting EU fish access to UK waters? And also briefly on this £6,000, would you consider paying back any more money?
On the question of fish, etc., again, that wasn't the nature of the discussion today. This was very much a discussion at leader level to set the tone, set the ambition, to make clear we were focused on deliverables, to set in place how we would go about these discussions and where we thought the appropriate timelines were, starting with the summit in the early part of next year, which obviously gives a sort of marker as to when we accept some progress to be made by. But we were not, it wasn't in the nature of a discussion about some of the issues, which will have to be part of the discussion, of course. But the question is about the tone and the good faith. In relation to the repayments, I can't add to the answer I've given twice now. Thank you. Bruno.
I'm going to come back to the fishing. I know you didn't talk about it today, just because you gave us some categorical assurances on free movement, customs union, and the rest. So I'm looking for a couple of categorical assurances. Will Britain hold the line on marine protection areas, bans on bottom trawling? We know that the French are unhappy with that. Can you give us a categorical assurance that Britain won't overturn the sand eel fishing ban in the North Sea that the EU is demanding that Britain drops? Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, look, on the first point you make, the red lines that we have set out, and we've been very open and public in relation to them, and they set the parameters of the debate that we can have. But I do think that we can be ambitious. I do think we can make progress. And today was about making sure that, as it were, from the very get-go, both sides are agreed that we want to act in good faith, we want to make progress, we want deliverables, and we want it to be constructive. The issues you raise, marine issues, etc., that literally was not the nature of the discussion today. I'm not suggesting that these things won't at some stage need to be addressed. Of course they will. But that wasn't what today was about. And I hope not to disappoint, but in the past, I'm not sure the sort of running commentary assisted this process, and therefore there'll probably be a bit less of it as we go through it this time around. Thank you very much. And then Max Delaney.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. Max Delaney, AFP. You just spoke about these talks being the beginning of a long path towards negotiations, towards a reset. Can you admit now that your much vaunted reset with the EU is not going to be easy, it's not going to be quick, and it's not going to be particularly extensive after all? And then on a second issue, on youth mobility, are you sacrificing the opportunities for British youth on an altar of freedom of movement and a refusal and wanting lower immigration figures? Thank you.
Well, Max, if you're putting to me that there are going to be challenges we'll have to deal with, then of course I accept that. That is obvious. But I think when acknowledging there are going to be challenges is a good thing up front. A lot of it is to do with the tone and the intent and the good faith, and in a sense today was as much about turning the page on the old way of doing these negotiations and starting a different way of doing it, a much more constructive way of doing it. Doesn't mean the challenges aren't there, it doesn't mean it's going to be easy. On the timing, look, we are putting in place milestones in order to make sure that we make progress, and therefore, we will hope to keep to those timetables, and that means we'll be heading for this summit in the early part of next year. On youth mobility, look, again, I have made it clear what our position is, and in particular that free movement is a red line. But today wasn't about those individual issues. It was about the way in which we will conduct these negotiations, and the emphasis was on what we can do, not what we can't do, and on deliverables rather than sort of running commentary. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you for your questions.
Okay, that was Sir Keir Starmer there addressing the press, including our own Olivia Utley in Brussels. Cutting back to the studio here, I'm still joined by Ben Habib. Let's just go over some of the details in case you missed that. He started off by saying they spoke with the fellow members of the G7, talking about Israel's right to defend itself. And it's vitally important that we work with our partners. We're specifically pressed on what today's conversation was about. I don't really think, Ben Habib, we got any detail whatsoever out of that. He said he spoke in Brussels word salads in many senses. He talks about promoting growth, on climate change, illegal immigration, our relationship with the EU on a more stable foundation. He did say there'd be no return to the single market or the customs union or freedom of movement, and he talks about regular EU-UK summit, so there's going to be a lot more coziness with Mrs von der Leyen, etc. What were your takeaways from it?
So the three big headings that he gave, growth and prosperity, for that I read an attempt to, have easier trade between Europe and the United Kingdom. That can only happen at a price. He then went on to talk about climate change, which in my view stands in opposition to growth and prosperity, the net zero agenda. By the way, they always couch the debate about net zero in terms of climate change, because they don't want you to challenge their policy of net zero. Yeah. But he was basically referring to net zero. Illegal migration, I see that his disclosure about cooperating on illegal migration as his preparing us to concede the position on their resettlement scheme that we discussed in the earlier part of the programme. In other words, taking illegal migrants from Europe and settling them in the United Kingdom. He talked about closer security cooperation in these uncertain times. And that, for me, is the European Defence Union. Yes. And for viewers who aren't familiar with this, the permanent structured cooperation that the EU champions and has established is not... People often say that's the equivalent, the European equivalent of NATO. It's quite different to NATO in two significant senses. The first is that NATO is the coming together of nation-states, sovereign nation-states cooperating. Yep. PESCO will be under the control of Brussels, and it prohibits any members of PESCO from challenging EU foreign policy. So you come under the umbrella completely of what the EU wishes to do. That would be the subjugation of our armed forces. We would literally be giving up an independent defence of the United Kingdom.
Yeah.
That's why I say he's anti-British. So I see this as, sure, he may get a closer trading relationship. It'll come at large cost to our security, to a net zero, our economy, and of course we'll be giving into their illegal migration resettlement programme. The other thing he said, that there wouldn't be a return to freedom of movement. He didn't once rule out the youth mobility scheme, by the way. He didn't rule it out. And that is freedom of movement through the back door, because once you've established it for the up to 30, all you have to do is move the age limit and, you know, you're heading towards freedom of movement again. Then he talked about us not going into the customs union or the single market. Part of the United Kingdom is already in the single market for goods for the European Union, which is Northern Ireland, which is why I carry this badge, because I've been fighting the Irish Sea border that puts Northern Ireland in the single market for goods in the European Union. So I'm afraid I take no heart that this man is going to respect the vote of the British people to leave the European Union and the successive 4 elections that took place after that, reaffirming that decision. He is taking us step by step back into the EU.
What was fascinating, when he was pushed on specific details repeatedly, even by friendly media, people that like the prospect of getting back into the EU, on freedom of movement, on youth mobility and on fishing, he got quite tetchy. Well, today wasn't about details. He was saying, well, why not? And particularly on fishing, when he was asked a very good question, can you categorically assure us that Britain will hold the line on marine protection on things like sand eels? He sort of said, well, we haven't got into those sort of details now. This is more about deliverables. And anyway, it's some more word salads about putting in place milestones, keeping to timetables, a bit more like David Brent than a Prime Minister, but was getting quite touchy on deliverables and wouldn't actually say, no, these are red lines, I will protect the British fishing industry. He didn't say that.
He didn't. And it's protecting our British environment. You know, the sand eels, I mentioned it in the earlier part, it's the way the Europeans fish. You know, they dredge up the bottom of the sea and they kill the habitat in which these fish live. We used to catch, by the way, in this country, 3 tons of fish, 3,000 tons of fish, 3 million tons of fish. Make my mind, I've got to get the numbers right. 3 million tons of fish in 1910. We now catch under 1 million. And that's because we've damaged the environment.
That's right.
They talk about the importance of sustainability of the environment. We are damaging it repeatedly, and the European Union is at the heart of it. And he wouldn't say no categorically to giving up our fish. So, no, I took no heart from that. He talked about deliverables. There was not a single deliverable that he really focused on.
And Ben Habib, what I thought was also particularly embarrassing for the Prime Minister, he was asked again, even by friendly media, about those £6,000 of Taylor Swift tickets, because as breaking news had just came out, he'd agreed to pay only £6,000. There was 107 grand, I thought. So the 101 grand is presumably OK. Let's go into detail that at another point. But he was then saying we need to draw up some principles. We promised to change politics. Do you think it's embarrassing for a Prime Minister? This is the moment in Brussels on the stage to represent British interests in Europe. And he's being asked about the tawdry fact he was taking giveaways. Not a good look.
Not a good look, and a very hypocritical look, given that they spent years and years, rightly in my view, criticising the Conservatives for the cronyism and self-enrichment and so on that took place when they were in government, and they said they would change that. It's hardly been a few weeks since they won the general election, and he can't make an international appearance with other heads of state without being questioned over his 6,000 quid Taylor Swift tickets. It's not a good look for a British Prime Minister.
Superb stuff. So, Ben Habib, marks out of 10 for Keir Starmer. How confident are you that he's not going to row back? He keeps saying no single market, no customs union, no freedom of movement, Brexit will not be overturned. He keeps making all the right noises in broad terms. But do you think actually there's going to be a more sinister ratcheting back?
Martin, we've heard this so many times. I mean, go back to Nigel Farage's debate with Nick Clegg in 2014. There will be no European army. Well, they have a 10,000-strong Frontex border force, and they've got permanent structured cooperation, European Defence Union, a European Defence Fund for the development of interoperable weaponry. They're a full-fledged state. That's why I say that anyone who wishes to get in with this project is basically anti-British, because you're getting into something that is run by Brussels against the interests of the nation-states of its members and certainly of the United Kingdom. No, I take no heart from any of the dodging of questions that he did, his little word salads to avoid actually making firm declarations. And to the extent he made any declarations, I don't believe him, because they will do it. And we will have a video, we'll have a clip of him making declarations that he won't do this, that and the other. We'll have that played back to us in 5 years' time when he's done exactly that.
Good, Ben Habib, super. Thank you for joining us in the studio. Excellent. The guard dog of Brexit, my fellow Brexit Party MEP colleague, Ben Habib, always a pleasure. Thank you very, very much. Busy day in Brussels. Now, lots more still to come between now and 6 o'clock, including a former Labour Defence Minister's reaction to what Sir Keir Starmer just said in Brussels. But first, is your headlines, and it's Cameron Walker.
Good afternoon. The top story is just after 5:30. And as you've been hearing, the Prime Minister has confirmed there will be no return to freedom of movement in any reset of relations between the UK and the European Union. Sir Keir Starmer has been speaking at a press conference in Brussels in the last few minutes, where he is meeting European Union chiefs with a promise to put the Brexit years behind us and form a closer relationship with the bloc. It's his first visit to Brussels as Prime Minister.
Now, of course, there will be issues which are difficult to resolve, and on areas on which we will stand firm. There will be no return to freedom of movement, no return to the customs union, no return to the single market. But we will find constructive ways to work together and deliver for the British people.
Well, meanwhile, Sir Keir Starmer has paid back more than £6,000 worth of gifts and hospitality received since becoming Prime Minister. Downing Street's confirmed he's covering the costs of 6 Taylor Swift tickets, 4 to the races, and a clothing rental agreement with a high-end designer favoured by his wife, Lady Victoria Starmer. It comes after Sir Keir and other cabinet members who vowed to clean up British politics faced weeks of criticism for accepting tens of thousands of pounds worth of freebies from wealthy donors. And it has actually been confirmed that Labour peer at the centre of the row over donations to Sir Keir Starmer is under investigation by the Lord's Standards watchdog. Lord Wahid Ali is accused of alleged non-registration of interests, leading to a possible breach of the Members' Code of Conduct. A Labour spokesperson says Lord Ali will cooperate fully with the Lords Commissioner, and he is confident all interests have been registered. It's understood the investigation doesn't relate to donations, rather a clerical element of already declared interests. Police in Denmark have confirmed that an explosion outside the Israeli embassy in Copenhagen was caused by hand grenades. There are no injuries reported, and it's too early to say how big the blasts had been, according to a police spokesperson. Police in Sweden, meanwhile, have also confirmed that loud bangs outside the Israeli embassy in Stockholm last night were the result of gunfire aiming at the building. Meanwhile, there are fears in the Middle East. It is on the cusp of an all-out war after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu swore that Iran will pay for the large-scale missile attack it launched on Israel yesterday evening. And Conservative leadership candidates have reflected on their general election defeat in their final speeches at the party's conference in Birmingham. Tom Tugendhat, James Cleverly, Robert Jenrick and Kemi Badenoch are all appealing to members in their bids to replace Rishi Sunak.
Stand for cutting our bloated foreign aid budget and for spending 3% of GDP on our defence.
A new political force has risen, something I have been fighting all my political career: identity politics.
We have to be better, much better. And under my leadership, we will be.
My mission is the prosperity and happiness of the British people. Together, we can win.
Well, those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Cameron Walker. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome to your GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Well, we've got a cold night ahead with some frost and fog in places, but as we head into tomorrow, plenty of fine and settled weather for many. The south will have to wait, though, for that as we head into this afternoon. Still plenty of cloud here as low pressure dominates, but as high pressure builds from the north, that's bringing us that fine and settled weather. As I say, though, as we head into this evening, there will still be some cloud across the south and southeast and still a few showers feeding into some east and southeastern coasts, but these will generally ease away as we head overnight. And this leaves plenty of clear skies overnight as well, so it is going to be turning cold and we're likely to see some fog, particularly in northern rural spots, and likely to see some frost by the time we wake up tomorrow as well. So to start tomorrow, as I say, most of that cloud generally breaking through the course of the night, but still some showers just feeding in to the southeast coast still by the time we reach tomorrow morning. But elsewhere, plenty of clear skies, so plenty of fog patches in places, and it will be feeling chilly with some frost in places too. But generally largely dry, just away from those showers just feeding into the southeast coast. Tomorrow as well, we've got high pressure building, and that means generally a better day for all, largely dry and settled with plenty of sunny spells around. As I say, still the odd shower just moving into the southeast coast, but you'll probably be unlucky if you catch any of those. Generally dry, just perhaps a build of higher cloud just moving into western parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland later on into the afternoon. But with much lighter winds, generally feeling more pleasant where you do catch the sunshine. As we head into the evening as well, that cloud will continue to build in the west, perhaps some light rain here at times, but overall generally another dry night, plenty of clear spells, so more mist and fog to come and feeling cold once again too. And we are expecting a bit more of unsettled weather as we head into the weekend, so make sure you stay tuned for all the details. Bye for now.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Johnny Ratner. The M8 in North Lanarkshire is partly blocked eastbound at junction 5, the Shotts exit, where a car drove into the central reservation, involved in an accident causing long queues westbound on the opposite side of the carriageway due to onlookers. On the M60 in Greater Manchester, one lane is closed clockwise from junction 11 to 12 towards the M62 at the Eccles interchange where emergency repair works continue. And in southeast London at Sydenham, the A212, the Sydenham Road, that's still closed and the scene of an accident. In Somerset, north of Ilchester, the A37 closed between East Pennant and West Lidford at the scene of a two-vehicle collision. And on London Underground, the District Line still can't run from High Street Kensington to Edgware Road, and that was following a points failure. And that's the very latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome back. Your time is 5:38. I'm Martin Daubney here on GB News. Now, we've just heard from Keir Starmer, who's been in Brussels today as part of his so-called reset with the European Union. Speaking to journalists, he finally declared that there will be no return to freedom of movement, although he wouldn't be drawn on the youth mobility scheme. Let's now get the thoughts of the former Labour Minister, Ivor Kaplan. Ivor, welcome to the show. Always a pleasure. So you were listening in there, no doubt, with bated breath. We were expecting some detail. That was thin on the ground. What's your take on Sir Keir Starmer's utterances in Brussels?
I was about to say hello to you, Martin, and then I realised I needed to listen to it as well. Actually, there wasn't very much to say, was there? That's the point. And I'm not surprised that he's made sure that with young people, I think that's the key area now, the under 30s, as to how we can at least do something in the future. And I think that will come in a way that the parties will need to do. And I think that's why the conversation today with Ursula and everything else was really quite important. I think it's not happened before in the 3 and a bit months, so it's good for the party to have had that conversation as a starting point.
And yet, Ivor, Sir Keir Starmer was saying no return to the single market or the customs union or freedom of movement, but was repeatedly pushed by even friendly journalists on this youth mobility scheme. And again, before today, Mr Starmer made it perfectly clear that he wants to open up the continent, wants to open up Britain to the European Union, potentially millions of under-30s, but he wouldn't be drawn on that today. Why won't he give us any detail? Why is he hiding?
I don't think he's hiding at all, Martin. You know, look, this will be something that I think is now being dealt with by Number 10 and by Keir and by the obviously the cabinet, and they'll be looking at all the details. You can't do this. I know I've said this before, and I'm sure your viewers will start to get bored if I keep saying it, but you can't just do it all in one hit. It's just not how it works. Government doesn't work like that, never has. We both know that anyway. But I think there is a desire amongst Labour supporters, definitely, and I think probably Conservative supporters, that we should have some youth arrangement that with Brussels, and I think that's probably where we will get to in time, but it's not going to happen quickly.
You say that Labour voters might want it, and they might. It wasn't in the manifesto. It wasn't pledged at all. It's come from nowhere after the event. So nobody got the chance to vote on this. It's been plucked out of a hat after the event. A bit like the winter fuel allowance being axed. That wasn't in the manifesto either. So you say that people might want it. Saying that Conservative voters want it, I think is extraordinary. We had 4 people today, potential leaders, set out their stall either, and they all said that controlling borders was paramount. And the Conservative Party, I think, would be insane to appoint somebody who wanted something like freedom of movement for under 30s, because, you know, there are millions and millions of people aged under 30 in the European Union. We have a paucity of people prepared to do jobs in Britain because they're on benefits. The answer isn't to import more people from under 30 from the EU. The answer is to get people off benefits and into jobs.
I didn't think it was about that. I think it was more about what young people want to do in terms of understanding that what they were able to do up until 2020, you're not allowed to do at the moment in the same way. But I just think that's where that is going, and I think it's been like that for a while, and I don't think it's really a surprise.
He was pushed as well, Keir Starmer, on fishing, something that was on the table before today. You know, the details on fishing, the rights, the fishing rights of the access of European Union fleets to British waters are up for grabs. Renegotiation in 2026. As I explained with Ben Habib, my previous guest, I went through the withdrawal agreement, you know, for my sins, and it's set in stone, Ivor Kaplan. If we want to row back on fishing, as in make those waters more sovereign, more British, we'll have to surrender something to the EU. So there's only going to go one way, and that is giving the EU more access to British waters. And many people see that as yet more of a betrayal of Brexit.
Well, I'm a Remainer, so I don't know whether I'm the person to make comment on this. Look,
for example, Ivor, as a former Labour minister, if you were sitting in government now, would surrendering more rights to British waters to the European Union be a price you'd be prepared to pay?
I think if that was the case, I would want to see all of the information before we got anywhere close to that. And I think the fishing issue is going to have to be dealt with in 2026, I think, isn't it?
Yeah.
And if that's the case, you know, there's going to have to be quite a lot of work in the next few months leading up to those conversations. And I think we should have those conversations. I think for the fishing people who've been saying very constantly, if you go to Cornwall or other places, you know, they're complaining about the fact that they don't have what they would be expecting to see. So let's get it all out and get it ready, and then see what everyone says. And I think there is a case for having that kind of approach towards the future, because that's what we're trying to do.
But Ivor Kaplan, the reason that the fishing communities in Britain are saying they weren't given what they wanted is because we didn't get a proper Brexit for our fishing communities. Those quotas, they were bodged by Boris. There wasn't taking back control of our sovereign waters, and that left the door open for Keir Starmer to go back and give even more away. That's the point.
Well, I was about to talk about Boris and what he gave to the United Kingdom. But you're right. If you look at what happened in 2016 with the actual vote, and then what happened in 2020, there is quite a big difference between those two things. And I think it's fair to say that there was no real understanding of what was going to happen in 2020 onwards. And I think that's the mess that we are in. And we're going to have to find a way out of it, in particular on fishing, because in 2026 we have to have those conversations with the EU.
And Ivor, can I quickly ask you about the fact that this was Keir Starmer's big day in Brussels as a stand-up, serious leader. He was getting asked about $6,000 worth of Taylor Swift tickets, even by friendly media. It's a terribly embarrassing look, isn't it?
Well, it is. I was along the looking of all the sort of prime ministers, et cetera, who've done this. I see that David Cameron was getting some grief as well in the last few days about some clothes that he had. I think we should just start this and move on. You know, everyone knows that there's clothes and all that sort of thing. Let's just get on with the important parts of running the government and bringing to the government the kind of changes that people wanted to see when they voted on July the 4th.
OK, I'm sure you'd like the story to disappear, but I'm afraid I don't think it will. Thank you very much for joining us, former Labour Minister Ivor Kaplan. Now, and here's one for you. Where were you when we were getting high? Sorry, but they did tell me to sing. Oasis fans apparently have secretly buried drugs in Heaton Park ahead of their massive Manchester comeback gig. You've got to admire their gumption, if nothing else. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This Sunday, join me, Camilla Tominey, for an exclusive interview with one of the most controversial, influential and unique political figures of our time. Boris Johnson will be in studio discussing his new memoir, Unleashed, the gripping story of how he dealt with plotting politicians, problematic princes and a pandemic. From Boris bikes to Brexit and everything else in between. This Sunday at 9:30 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
A furious online debate has been sparked after, well, let's just say a rather large man, I mean, he really was big, was snapped trying to fit into his seat on the plane.
It's led to some to ask whether obese passengers should have to pay for extra plane seats so they don't inconvenience others.
Some say, though, that's cruel. So should plus-size passengers pay extra for plane seats? Let's talk to former presenter of Fat Families, Steve Miller, who's in Stratford-upon-Avon, and the director of All About Obesity, Sarah LeBrock, who's in beautiful Harrogate. Good to see you both this morning. Sarah, what do you think?
Well, we've had this debate before with Steve and I, to be fair, and I think it's one of those things where planes are just not fit for purpose anymore. So people's bodies have been growing over the years. We know this, the obesity rates are increasing, etc. But what's happening to planes is the seats are decreasing in size. So they're just not fit for purpose and not fit for the population. So I think it's just one of these things where we need to be more empathetic to people, that they're trying to fit into an environment that isn't shaped for them at all. So I think we do need to kind of say, well, what's right here? Is it the person not being able to fit in the seat, or is it the seat not being fit for purpose for the person? And I think we need to really, look at things from that perspective as well. Instead of thinking the person's doing something wrong, how about the environment might be doing something wrong?
Steve?
It's not about blaming, but the message you can't put out, in my opinion, is that it's okay to be obese and don't worry about it. You see, what I'm saying here is free plane seats. If you're offering free plane seats, an extra seat, that's going to normalise obesity.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I was looking for some action. Sorry, welcome back. It's 5:50. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, Oasis fans are apparently burying their drugs in a park 10 months ahead of the band's big reunion gigs. They've been boasting to drugs counsellors, of all people. They've hidden their stashes in Manchester's Heaton Park. Got to say, this made me laugh. And here's a man who would enjoy the story too. James McMahon, host of the James McMahon Music Podcast. I'm so sorry, Jim, to inflict my terrible singing on you. But nevertheless, you've got to say one thing about the drug dealers of Manchester. They know about forward planning.
They do. I feel this whole... well, first off, if my mum's watching this, then maybe go put the kettle on, Mum. I don't want you to see this side of his son. But secondly, this whole story has made me feel very proud to be British. I don't know about you, Martin. It's made me feel like for all of the failings of modern society that we spend a lot of our times, a lot on your show, bemoaning, in lots of ways we feel a little bit like our culture's under attack. There's a real sense of... we've really bred a generation of squirrels, of sort of squirrel-human hybrids, well-dressed squirrel-human hybrids, and I'm for it. This whole story has made me feel very proud to be British.
Because, of course, it's an outdoor park. They know where the gig's going to be, and locals have been and they've used their gumption. And look, nobody is saying this is a good idea, but of all things, Jimmy, the local drug addicts have been telling their counsellors that they're going to bury their stashes. Not the smartest thing. The sniffer dogs might be out in force. Got a quick minute, Jim? Yeah,
I'll be honest, the amount of times I've been to festivals and, as the years have gone on, they've become much heavier policed. I don't think the idea of the free festivals aren't what they used to be. Like, people know what happens at these things. So I do feel like, again, not saying it's a great idea, but I do feel like this enterprising nature is testimony to just how difficult it is to have that kind of carry on, if that makes sense.
OK, super. So, James McMahon, always a pleasure to see you. And I hope you get a ticket for the gig. I haven't yet, mate. Best of luck with that. Always a pleasure. Now, let's cross now back to Brussels. That's GB News' political correspondent, Olivia Utley. And you asked the question to Keir Starmer. Tell us about your question. Were you happy with the answer?
Yes, I asked Keir Starmer firstly about the details of this new reset relationship with the EU. He claimed that he would be talking to Ursula von der Leyen, opening discussions, but there would be no return to freedom of movement. I asked him about fishing. Would he consider giving the EU access to UK fishing waters? He said he wouldn't be drawn on that. Well, that's something in the past that he said he would be very, very reluctant to do, and rightly so, given how many fishing and coastal communities in the UK voted for Brexit precisely because they did not want the EU to have access to British fishing waters. I also asked him about that £6,000 that he has now paid back for some of the donations that he's received in the last few years. I asked him, will he be thinking of paying back any more? He wouldn't be drawn on that one either. He said that there's going to be a new principle in place for ministers accepting donations. So in the meantime, he was happy to pay back £6,000. £6,000 is a drop in the ocean of the amount that he's taken in donations. So let's see how that develops over the next few days.
Olivia Utley, superb work. Thank you very much today for being our muscles in Brussels, holding Keir Starmer to account. Now, that's all from me for tonight. But don't forget, Jubes & Co. is up next. I'll be back on your screens from 3 p.m. tomorrow. Don't forget Nigel Farage. He's back at 7 till 8. Now, it's your weather with Honor Krizik.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome to your GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Well, we've got a cold night ahead with some frost and fog in places, but as we head into tomorrow, plenty of fine and settled weather for many. The south will have to wait though for that as we head into this afternoon. Still plenty of cloud here as low pressure dominates, but as high pressure builds from the north, that's bringing us that fine and settled weather. As I say though, as we head into this evening, there will still be some cloud across the south and southeast and still a few showers feeding into some east and southeastern coasts, but these will generally ease away as we head overnight. And this leaves plenty of clear skies overnight as well, so it is going to be turning cold and we're likely to see some fog, particularly in northern rural spots, and likely to see some frost by the time we wake up tomorrow as well. So to start tomorrow, as I say, most of that cloud generally breaking through the course of the night, but still some showers just feeding in to the southeast coast still by the time we reach tomorrow morning. But elsewhere, plenty of clear skies, so plenty of fog patches in places, and it will be feeling chilly with some frost in places too. But generally, largely dry, just away from those showers just feeding into the southeast coast. Tomorrow as well, we've got high pressure building, and that means generally a better day for all, largely dry and settled with plenty of sunny spells around. As I say, still the odd shower just moving into the southeast coast, but you'll probably be unlucky if you catch any of those. Generally dry, just perhaps a build of higher cloud just moving into western parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland later on into the afternoon. But with much lighter winds, generally feeling more pleasant where you do catch the sunshine. As we head into the evening as well, that cloud will continue to build in the west, perhaps some light rain here at times, but overall generally another dry night, plenty of clear spells, so more mist and fog to come and feeling cold once again too. And we are expecting a bit more of unsettled weather as we head into the weekend, so make sure you stay tuned for all the details. Bye for now.
Despite the morning rain, it'll be a nice, warm, cosy day ahead. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, my name is Johnny Ratner. Long delays in North Lanarkshire this evening on the M8 in both directions. Well, the eastbound carriageway of the motorway is down to a single lane at junction 5, the Shots exit. A car